Thank you. I would like to call this adjourned Planning Commission meeting, regular meeting scheduled on May 25th, 2021 to order. Would you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Put your right hand over your heart. Begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Yes, roll call vote. Commissioner Alderete. Commissioner Calderon. Commissioner Vice Chair Morrissey.
Here.
Commissioner Pham.
Here.
Commissioner Ramos. Commissioner Wu.
Here.
Chair McLaughlin.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Calderon will not be in attendance today, and Commissioner Alderete and Commissioner Ramos will be joining us shortly. Chair, you do have quorum.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite the Secretary of the Commission to describe the way the public can access this virtual meeting.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed via our portal at www.santa-ana.primegov.com/public/portal and to YouTube at youtube.com/City of Santa Ana Videos Live. If you would like to provide a public comment, you may do so in one of the following ways. Join the meeting via Zoom. Enter meeting ID 952-601-01038. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, select the hand icon to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the name you entered. Call 669-900-9128 and enter meeting ID 952-601-01038. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press *9 to let us know that you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you are called upon, you must press *6 to unmute yourself. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and I will alert you when your time is up. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to public comments on non-agenda items. Madam Secretary, does anybody wish to speak on a non-agenda item this evening?
If you would like to comment on a non-agenda item, please select the hand icon, or if you're calling in by phone, press *9 now. I'll wait a few seconds to see if we have anyone. We do not have any speakers, Chair.
Thank you. We will close public comments on non-agenda items and we'll move on to the consent calendar. My question, Madam Chair, is do we not have the minutes for May 10th for this evening's approval?
That's correct.
Okay. Is that, we have approved those already or?
No, those will be presented at the next meeting, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right. The item we have is excused absence. What I'd like to do is I'd like to close the consent calendar for the moment and come back to that when we have when several of the commissioners join us. So we'll end the consent calendar and we'll move on to the business calendar. The first item is the general plan consistency finding for the fiscal year of 2021 and 2022 capital improvement program. We'll have Jason Gabriel from the Public Works Agency give us his presentation at this point in time. And then after that, we can have any questions we'd like at this point. Jason, please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you and good evening, and to the chair and planning commissioners. I'm Jason Gabriel with the Public Works Agency, and it is my pleasure to present to you a brief presentation of the highlights of the capital improvement program for fiscal year 21-22. Can I guess, can we advance the slides to the next slide, please? The CIP is the plan that details the proposed projects for our coming fiscal year. The plan is made up of projects funded by a number of sources. This year includes the usual combination of various local funding sources as well as some grant funding sources, as you can see here. We have a number of local sources, including gas tax, general fund, cell tower, drainage area fees, and as well as our funding for sewer and water projects. And then we have a number of grant funded projects that include active transportation monies, Measure M, that's OCTA's half-cent sales tax. We get a local fair share component that's formulaic based on population. And then finally, we have CDBG monies. And actually, those were approved by council on May 4th. Next slide, please. This slide for the commissioners that received the CIP book. This slide details kind of the information and the summary for the CIP. Projects are broken down into categories, and later in the presentation, we'll be diving in a little bit into those categories. Funding amounts are provided by source and the total project and category type, and we will get into more detail on the next slide, please. So this is a summary of next year's capital improvement program. The main categories that we always break these down into: street improvements, traffic improvements, utility drainage and lighting improvements, as well as general municipal or building type improvements or facility type improvements. For street improvements, we have about $16 million this coming year. That's 28% of the CIP. Traffic improvements, 8 million, utility drainage and lighting for 23, and finally municipal for 10 million. Next slide, please. This is a breakdown of the street improvements of the 16 million that's funded. Some highlights include the rehabilitation of a number of arterial streets, including Bristol, Grand, Main, and Westminster. We also have some additional funding for some ongoing widening projects that are wrapping up their design in the coming year, including some projects on Bristol, Warner, and the Fairview Bridge over the Santa Ana River. And finally, one of the components of this category is the preventative maintenance of and rehabilitation of residential and industrial streets. Next slide, please. In our traffic category, we have some signal improvements on Bristol, Santa Clara, and First Street Corridor, as well as some mobility and safety projects near Fremont Elementary and Spurgeon Intermediate. Next slide, please. We have a lot going on in our public utility and drainage improvements. We have a number of sewer projects on Fairhaven, in Santa Ana Memorial and Willard neighborhoods, as well as various industrial streets. And the area that was recently annexed in the northeast part of town near 17th and Tustin will be doing some installation of a new sewer system there. Water system includes water main improvements on Bristol, Euclid, and Fairview. And we have some upgrades to some of our water facilities at Well 32, as well as some of the chlorine buildings at the east and west reservoirs. Next slide, please. And finally, for the final category, municipal facilities, we have some bus shelters that will be installed at various locations citywide. That's from money from OCTA specifically for that purpose, as well as park improvements at Centennial, including a new dog park, lighting at the Dan Young Soccer Complex, some improvements at the Santa Ana Stadium, as well as in El Salvador, Riverview, and Santa Anita parks. Next slide, please. This slide details, we do a one-year CIP for our funding for next fiscal year, but we also plan for 7 years as much as we can. And this is the totals for the 7-year capital improvement program, which includes, again, monies for next year, as well as out years for various programs that we have identified funding for. So With that, that includes my presentation of the CIP. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, do any of the commissioners have any questions of Justin?
I think one of the commissioners, Commissioner Ramos. raised his hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair McLaughlin and Jason. I actually don't have a question for Jason. It's a question for staff in general. I'm being asked if there's interpretation being provided for tonight's meeting.
There is,
And if there is, how can it be accessed? Folks are saying they don't see the interpretation feature on their end.
Yes, Commissioner Ramos, there is interpretation being provided. When the member of the public logs on to the Zoom account, they will hear Cesar Vargas. He's translating for us. And I can hear him on the YouTube.
Recording in progress. Can you, just in case there's new members of the public that have joined, can you quickly state how they can access the interpretation, please?
Yes, in order to access the interpretation for tonight's meeting, the YouTube channel that's listed on the agenda, there's a link to our YouTube channel. If they click on that link, it will take them to this meeting, and there's the option for English and for Spanish.
Thank you. And I'm going to quickly say that in Spanish. So, para las personas que necesitan interpretación en español, si miran la agenda de esta reunión, van a ver un enlace para el canal de YouTube de la ciudad. Si van al canal de YouTube, ahí van a poder tener acceso a esta junta en español. Thank you, sir.
okay. Anything else, Commissioner Ramos?
¿Vale? So, para las interpretación en español, si miran la agenda de esta reunión, van a ver un enlace para el canal de YouTube.
Okay, does anybody from the commission have any questions for Jason at this point in time? Okay, hearing none. Madam Secretary, is there anybody that would like to comment on this item besides the commissioners?
If you would like to comment on this agenda item, please select the hand icon now, or if you're calling in, please press *9 now. I do see that we have one person with their hand raised. Carla Juárez.
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Carla Juárez. Quería preguntar cómo se puede dar comentario en español. Yo tengo el privilegio de ser bilingüe y puedo comprender el inglés, pero en español el Zoom no te da la opción de poder escuchar la traducción en español solo por el canal de YouTube. Entonces, me preocupa a los miembros de la comunidad que se están conectando, cómo poder dar un comentario público. Si por favor me lo pueden explicar a mí y también a los miembros de la comunidad que están con nosotros, que son monolingües y el lenguaje de ellas es español.
Cesar, do you have the translation of that?
Yes, sir. My name is Carla Juarez, and my question is, how can people comment in Spanish in this meeting? I have the privilege of being bilingual. I speak English and Spanish, but many people in Zoom cannot hear the interpretation in Zoom, and they can only hear it in the YouTube channel. So how can the community make a comment in Spanish? And right now, if you can explain to me and to the community, how can monolingual speakers make a comment in Spanish?
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments at this point in time, Madam Secretary?
Just one moment as I scroll this list. Yes, we do have another caller. Citalia.
It's Citlali. Thank you. I just tried both options to enter the Zoom, choosing Spanish translation and to try to jump on the YouTube for Spanish, and both options are not working. They directly take you to English option. So this is really frustrating. I think the city of Santana has known for a very long while, and as city staff members should know that majority of like residents that call are English Spanish speakers. So we really need to like make sure that like we can make sure we meet them halfway. So I just wanted to uplift that in case folks are still having a hard time accessing the Spanish version of this.
Okay. At this point in time, are there any other comments from the commissioners or the audience?
I'll make a quick comment, Chair McLaughlin, on the item. I'm glad to see that this item is being presented. And I know there's a lot of the neighborhoods that were mentioned are in dire need of these improvements, specifically thinking of the Willard neighborhood, where when it rains, the streets become rivers. So I'm glad to see this on the agenda tonight. And thank you, Jason, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to approve this matter?
So moved.
That's Commissioner Ramos motioned. Do we have a second? Do we
I'll
have a
make
second?
a second, Mark.
All right, Commissioner Wu, seconds. Madam Secretary, would you call a roll call vote?
Yes, roll call vote. Commissioner Alderete. Commissioner Calderon. Vice Chair Morrissey. Vice Chair Morrissey. Vice Chair Morrissey. Okay, we'll come back to Vice Chair Morrissey. Commissioner Pham. Commissioner Pham. Okay, we'll come back to Commissioner Pham. Commissioner Ramos. Commissioner Wu.
Yes.
Okay.
Someone who has administrator rights may be muting some people. I don't know how you check on that.
There's Commissioner, we'll go back to Commissioner Pham. Aye, thank you. Vice Chair Morrissey. Okay, Chair McLaughlin.
Hello?
Aye.
Yes.
Morrissey, Tom, did you just say yes?
Vice Chair Morrissey. He is not muted and he is still online. Chair, would you like me to call for his vote again?
Try again, yes.
Vice Chair Morrissey. Chair, we do have a majority vote. I can call the vote.
Go ahead.
Okay, so motion passes by majority vote with Vice Chair Morrissey, Commissioner Alderete, and Commissioner Calderon absent.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the public hearing portion of the business calendar. Let's talk about public hearing protocols. I would like to now review the process of public hearing so that everyone knows what to expect. Staff will provide a presentation and answer questions from the commission. The public hearing will then be opened. The applicant will be given the opportunity to speak, limited to 15 minutes. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to comment, limited to 3 minutes. The applicant will be given the opportunity to respond to comments made by the public, limited to 5 minutes. Public hearing will then be closed. Discussion will return to the commission for formal action taken to approve, conditionally approve, deny, or continue review of the application. Please consider the following suggestions when organizing your comments. Please state your name and address. State whether or not you support, oppose, or are neutral to this proposal. Your statement shall include all pertinent facts within your knowledge. Avoid gossip, emotion, or repetition. A clear and concise, non-repetitive argument is most effective. This is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 2, the property located at 1951 East Dyer Road, Unit B. Please note, decision on this matter will be final unless appealed within 10 days of any interested individual or party. Before we begin, do any of the commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regards to this item? Commissioner Morrissey, do you have anything to disclose? We'll come back. Commissioner Fan, do you have anything to disclose? Commissioner Fan. Madam Secretary, this is the second time we've not been able to connect with FAM. All right, Commissioner Pham. Do you have anything to disclose? No?
Hello?
Yes. Do you have anything to disclose at this time? Commissioner Ramos,
No disclosures.
Commissioner Wu.
None whatsoever.
I don't have anything to disclose either at this point in time.
Chair McLaughlin, I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt you. Vice Chair Morrissey did message me. He's having technical difficulties. He'll be back on as soon as possible.
Okay. And
Hello?
and Fan. Commissioner Fan, are you able to connect?
Nothing to disclose.
Okay, that's fine. All right.
Just had to log out.
Okay. At this point in time, Pedro, please give us your presentation.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the next item on tonight's agenda is a request for the approval of conditional use permit 2021-07 to allow the sale of alcoholic beverages for on-premise consumption or a type 41 beer and wine license at a newly proposed establishment called Avatar Coffee Roasters to be located at 1951 East Dyer Road, Unit B. Next slide, please. The subject site is located northwest of Dyer and Red Hill intersection. The general plan designation is District Center, or DC, and has a zoning designation as Specific Development 88 or SD 88. The site is surrounded by warehouse and manufacturing uses to the north, south, and west, and surrounded by a hotel in the city of Tustin to the east. Next slide, please. The site is more commonly known as the Heritage or Broadstone Arden and contains 3 mixed-use commercial residential buildings. This next slide here provides a site photo of the newly built mixed-use building known as Building A. Next slide, please. Avatar Coffee Roasters is a Montclair-based business that was founded in 2019. This company specializes in high-end coffee for consumers while giving back a portion of sales to those in need. The company is proposing to expand their roasting facility with an additional location in Santa Ana that will focus on the education of home brewing process. The tenant will be the first to utilize the ground floor commercial area at the Heritage. The applicant is proposing to occupy 2,211 square feet of the existing shell tenant space on the ground floor. Tenant improvement plans have not been submitted to the building division for the proposed work. However, once the tenant improvements are finalized, the establishment will accommodate approximately 40 patrons within its dining area and operate Monday through Sunday between the hours of 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. The establishment will sell coffee, coffee drinks, tea, beer, wine, salads, sandwiches, and other baked goods. The sale, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages is proposed between the hours of 8 a.m. and 9 p.m., Monday through Saturday. At this time, no after hours or live entertainment are proposed at this location. Next slide, please. This slide provides the site plan and the proposed floor plan for the proposed location. As shown in red, all alcoholic beverages will be stored within the restaurant's kitchen area, and the alcohol storage and display area will make up less than 5% of the total restaurant floor area as required by the Santa Ana Municipal Code. Next slide, please. Staff has determined that the business meets state and the Santa Ana Municipal Code qualifications to be considered an eating establishment for a Type 41 ABC license. In addition, the storage and display of alcoholic beverages will make up less than 5% of the total establishment's floor area. The sale of alcoholic beverages will provide an ancillary service to residents and visitors of the area, and the establishment will not be located within immediate proximity to sensitive land uses. Furthermore, the police department is satisfied that the operational standards applicable to on-premise ABC licenses will mitigate any potential impacts to the surrounding community and therefore does not oppose the granting of the conditional use permit. Lastly, the conditions of approval, property maintenance agreement, and standards in the Santa Ana Municipal Code will address any potential negative impacts. Next slide, please. Pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, the project is categorically exempt per Section 15301 or Class 1 for existing facilities. Lastly, there is no fiscal impacts associated with this project. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve conditional use permit number 2021-07 as condition. That concludes staff's presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Pedro. Do any of the commissioners have any questions of Pedro at this point in time? Vice Chair Morrissey, are you back with us? Commissioner Pham?
No comment at this time.
Okay, Commissioner Ramos,
No comment at this time.
Commissioner Wu,
Their intention is to serve alcohol at 8 o'clock in the morning, right?
Pedro?
Thank you, Commissioner. The intention is to sell alcohol within the allowable times as outlined in our Santa Ana Municipal Code. And I do believe those are from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. So they will be serving alcohol from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. I guess if that clarifies for you.
Okay. I have no questions of you, Pedro, so thank you very much. Madam Secretary, have we received any written communication on this item?
We have not received any written communication on this item.
Thank you. Public hearing is now open. Would the applicant like to speak on this matter? Is the applicant with us this evening? Pedro?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see the applicant. Applicant, if you are available in tonight's Zoom meeting, please unmute yourself.
Okay. I guess at this point in time, we don't have any applicant to speak. Madam Secretary, we'll open the public hearing to public. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this item at this point in time?
If you would like to speak on this item, please select the hand icon you are participating through Zoom, or if you're calling by phone, press *9 now. We'll wait a few seconds to see if we have any speakers. And while we're waiting to see if we have any speakers, I would like to take a moment to clarify for the Spanish translation. If you would like to listen to this meeting in Spanish, please visit www.youtube.com/City of Santa Ana videos. Once you're there, you will see the option for Spanish and English. And with that, Chair, I don't see any speakers for this item.
Okay, since.
Sarah? Sarah,
Yes.
if I can interrupt, if you can please have Caesar provide that instruction in Spanish as well at this forum, please.
Caesar.
Sí, claro. Si quiere escuchar esta junta en español, puede asistir al canal de la ciudad en YouTube, que es youtube.com/City of Santa Ana Videos, y ahí estarán las opciones para escuchar en inglés y en español.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Caesar.
Cesar. Okay, the public hearing at this time is now closed. We'll bring it back to the commission for any final questions of staff. Again, we'll start off with is Vice Chair Morrissey with us at this time?
Yes, I got my sound fixed, but I really can't comment on anything because I just got back on.
Okay, that's fine. Commissioner Pham?
Thank you, Pedro, for the presentation. No comment at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramos?
Yes, thank you, Pedro, for the presentation. I have a question for staff. Pedro, is it common for an applicant to not be present when their item is being considered?
Thank you, Commissioner Ramos. Usually not common at all. Most applicants do like to jump on the meeting to answer any questions that the commission might have. I can't speak to tonight's occurrence, but it may have to do with the fact that this was originally planned for Monday, yesterday, the 24th, and due to the unforeseen rescheduling, maybe they weren't available for today, but we did let them know. And, my hope is that maybe they just, it was an oversight.
Thank you, Pedro. And I asked that because I know when considering similar items, we typically ask the applicant of their experience with ABC licenses. And I think it's unfortunate that the applicant isn't here tonight to answer those type of questions. So with that, I don't know how comfortable I feel considering the item tonight.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wu?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, I have no questions at this point in time. Would anybody like or care to take and make a motion on this item?
I'd like to move that we approve 2017-7. Anyway, I move we approve this conditional use permit.
Okay. Madam Secretary, would you repeat the motion?
The motion to approve item number 2.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a motion by Commissioner Wu to approve item number 2 for the property located at 1951 East Dyer Road, Unit B. Is there a second?
Is there a second on this?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Pham. Thank you. All right. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, roll call vote. Commissioner Alderete. Commissioner Calderon. Vice Chair Morrissey.
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Pham.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos.
No.
Commissioner Ramos is no. Commissioner Wu.
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin.
Yes.
Okay, motion fails for, we only have 3 votes in favor.
Can I make a different motion?
Go ahead.
I'd like to motion to continue this item to the next meeting or a future date if the applicant is unable to make the next meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
Okay. Madam Secretary, we have a motion, a second.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Ahead.
this is Pedro.
Yes.
Before the commission takes action on the motion on the table, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions Commissioner Ramos has if the concern is specifically about the applicant not being here. I fully understand, but if there's any attempt at answering the question at hand, I'd be happy to kind of take a stab at it. I do know this is the second location that the owner has. We can't specifically answer whether the Montclair location has an ABC license. But if there's any other reservations, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions they have.
Anybody have any questions of Pedro at this point in time?
I have no questions for Pedro, but thank you.
Thank you. And in addition, Vice Chair Morrissey, you did receive the staff report beforehand. You do have all of the information that is necessary to participate in this process. So I don't believe you necessarily have to recuse yourself from the decision-making process because of the technical issue that we had. If you have any questions that you want to ask of staff, we will be happy to answer that as well. But the information, again, that you have on your agenda, the staff report, is everything that is inclusive of the PowerPoint as well.
Okay, well, let me ask a question if I may. Was there any new information presented or questions that came up
There was no
prior to me?
There was no new information, and the questions that came up were essentially, there were no questions that were asked from the commissioners other than maybe 1 or 2 questions or comments. And there was, again, the applicant was not here, but that's not the first time that an applicant hasn't been at a planning commission meeting.
Okay, because from the information I saw, I'd feel comfortable voting on the item based on the information I saw if there wasn't any new information presented
Okay.
or discussed.
All right, so the first motion failed. We have a second motion on the table. And it's been seconded. So we need to do a vote on that. Is that not correct, John?
I don't think it
Yes.
was a second.
I didn't hear the second, but Executive Director Atai is correct that a member is not required to abstain just because it's an absence from any part of the public hearing, provided that he or she has read the staff report and all the accompanying materials and has provided the opportunity to ask questions of the commissioners and of the applicant at present.
Then there was a second by.
There was a
Commissioner
second on the second motion,
If
or we can take,
Vice Chair will, if the Vice Chair feels comfortable voting on the matter, I'll rescind my second and
Okay,
have
so-
another vote on the first motion.
so you've rescinded your second of the second motion. So the second motion is, we have a motion for the second, we have a motion from Commissioner Ramos. Is there anyone to second that motion? Hearing none. Does anyone like to make another motion?
We have a couple of new commissioners that joined us and who were presented with the material and have an opportunity to talk. Can I make a motion to bring the item up again for a vote?
Yes, sir. You can make a motion for that.
Okay, I'd like to reconsider a motion for those that abstain or were not here when it started.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so that's Commissioner Morrissey, second. Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, roll call vote. Commissioner Alderete, Commissioner Calderon, Vice Chair Morrissey,
Aye.
Commissioner Pham,
Sorry, can I hear the motion again? I was knocked out of the meeting. Just logged back on.
Yes, the motion is to approve the CUP for the property located at 1951 East Dyer Road, Unit B.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ramos,
No.
Commissioner Wu,
Yes. Also,
Chairman-
Commissioner Eric Alderete is on the line.
Okay, but all right, that's fine. But we have, he is,
I
We've
can
started
call
the
back for
motion.
his vote again if Commissioner Alderete. He has not responded. We'll move to Chair McLaughlin.
yes, aye, in favor.
Okay, motion passes by majority vote with Commissioner Alderete, Calderon absent, and Commissioner Ramos, no.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Moving on, this is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 3 for zoning ordinance amendment 2021-01. Please note, recommendation on this matter will be forwarded to the City Council at a later date for final determination. Before we begin, do any of the commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regards to this item? Commissioner Alderete. Commissioner Morrissey,
No disclosures, thank you.
Commissioner Fan,
Disclose. Thank you.
Ramos.
I received the letters from the Committee Commission and Latino Health Access, I believe as the other commissioners may have. I also want to disclose that Latino Health Access is one of my employers, but their opinion on this item will not influence my vote tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Wu,
Nothing to disclose. This is a citywide ordinance.
correct. I have nothing to disclose at this time either. Okay. Ally, it's your presentation. Please speak.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Before beginning, I'd just like to ensure everyone can hear me well.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up for discussion tonight is zoning ordinance amendment number 2021-1. It would be a citywide zoning ordinance amendment, meaning it would affect properties citywide. This would propose to amend sections 41-472 and 472.5 of the zoning code in the Santa Ana Municipal Code to require a conditional use permit for light processing facilities that are in the light industrial zoning district. And the recommendation is that you recommend that the City Council approve this zoning ordinance amendment this evening. So just for some background on recycling facilities and their regulations in the City of Santa Ana, the first recycling ordinance was adopted in 1988 for the City of Santa Ana. This was through City Council ordinance and basically created a new article in the zoning code to regulate recycling facilities in an effort to implement the California Beverage Container and Recycling and Litter Reduction Act. About a decade later, another ordinance was adopted by City Council to update the recycling regulations to remain in compliance with state law. In a nutshell, both of these ordinances resulted in a regulatory framework that has definitions and allowances and regulations for recycling facilities and their related uses in Santa Ana. So just for some additional context on what we're addressing tonight, in general, processing facilities are facilities where recyclable materials such as cans, bottles, paper, other materials, are baled, compacted, and in other forms processed, sometimes involving crushing, sorting, shredding, cleansing, and remanufacturing at a centralized facility. So there are 12 light processing facilities currently in existence in the city. 11 of these in an analysis were found to be within 1,000 feet or about a quarter mile of properties zoned or used for residential purposes. 6 of these are located in the light industrial zoning district, and the remaining are in the heavy industrial zoning district or have non-conforming status in other zoning districts. So detailed maps in the staff report illustrated these locations for your benefit this evening. This item was taken to City Council on May 4th, 2021, so not too long ago, as an urgency ordinance to help close the loophole that we're attempting to address this evening. That urgency ordinance was adopted unanimously by the City Council, but in order to have it be effective permanently in the future, it does require Planning Commission and then City Council vote on a permanent ordinance. So this is an overview of the City of Santa Ana, showing a map of the city, as well as the existing processing facilities in Santa Ana. The orange dots represent the 12 locations that I was referring to earlier. A large concentration of these, 5 out of the 12, are located inside the transit zoning code or near it in mixed use zoning areas where there's often residential and industrial land uses either abutting one another or very, very close to one another. Other locations are located in mixed use areas near Artesia Pilar. So currently when reading the zoning code, one would see that light processing facilities are a by right use in the industrial zoning districts. This means that light processing facilities, which are essentially these types of facilities that are under 45,000 square feet and have limited truck shipments, these would be allowed without any sort of conditional use permit. These properties, according to the code today, may not abut properties zoned or used for residential purposes, but despite not abutting them, as illustrated by the map, they may be located in close proximity to residential areas, including many of our environmentally sensitive neighborhoods that we've been working on through the general plan update process, such as Delhi, Logan, and many others scattered throughout the city, and even neighborhoods that are not necessarily part of an established neighborhood association, such as areas near this harbor specific plan. As mentioned earlier, an urgency ordinance was adopted by City Council unanimously on May 4th, which amended the zoning code to require the CUP that's being proposed tonight in the permanent ordinance. But as stated earlier, a permanent ordinance is needed to make these changes effective permanently in the future. So without a CUP requirement, these facilities could pose, and the process for reviewing them could pose challenges to the city. First of all, the absence of a CUP requirement does not allow the city to evaluate each application for consistency with surrounding properties and neighborhoods. So a sort of compatibility review. Is the use even compatible with the surrounding landscape and the general plan? Secondly, through this review process, without having a CUP requirement, there's no ability to recommend approval or denial of these applications subject to a discretionary review process, such as the previous CUP that we just evaluated for liquor. And because of this absence, it does not allow the city to add or recommend conditions of approval on these sort of facilities. So the amendment would allow the Planning Commission and City Council to basically require a CUP for each type of facility and evaluate each request for consistency with the zoning code, general plan, and neighborhood compatibility. Secondly, it would also, if recommended for approval and adopted, each CUP would allow the city and the commission to impose conditions of approval to ensure compatibility and unimpactful operations of such facilities with surrounding properties and neighborhoods, such as truck shipments or noise and vibration impacts or hours of operation, or requirements for improvements to the site, such as permanent structures or other forms that are commensurate, other conditions that are typical and commensurate with such applications. In addition, when reviewing this project, we find that the project is not subject to CEQA pursuant to the certain exemptions that are afforded to municipalities under the state CEQA guidelines. There's also no fiscal impact associated with the recommended action tonight. So based on these analyses, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve this zoning ordinance amendment to amend sections 41.472 and 472.5 of the SAMC to close a loophole that we've identified and require a conditional use permit for light processing facilities in the light industrial zoning district. And based on this presentation and analyses, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Commissioner Alderete, any questions?
No
of staff?
comments. No comments.
Commissioner Morrissey, Vice Chair Morrissey,
I have no questions.
Commissioner Fan.
Thank you, Ali. When you were referring to the light processing facilities, does that also reference to those shipping containers that are kind of located in the back of like different parking lots that receive recycling materials as well?
Thank you, Commissioner Pham, and no. Light processing facilities are industrial uses that do the sort of crushing and briquetting and packaging and cleansing. The facilities that you're talking about are commonly, for example, like at the back of a grocery store. Those are small collection facilities where you would maybe drop off and get a receipt to go get financial compensation for the CRV. So they're not the same thing, but thank you for the question.
That's it. Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Fan?
No question. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramos.
No questions, just a comment that I'm happy to see this item tonight. I know that some of these facilities are within 500 feet or less of elementary schools in Santa Ana. So I think this is appropriate and necessary. And I also want to apologize for my disclosure statement that may have confused everyone. That's going to be for the next item. I had no disclosures for this item. Just for that.
Commissioner Wu.
Various neighborhoods have been talking about the placing of these facilities in their community and thus destroying the neighborhood integrity. I think this will go a long way to assuring staff involvement into monitoring the facilities and to meet the conditional use permit. So I applaud staff for updating the ordinance.
Thank you, Commissioner Wu. I do not have any questions of staff. Madam Secretary, have we received any written communication on this item?
We have not received any written communication on this item.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing since there is no applicant at this point in time.
If you'd like to speak on,
go ahead.
If you'd like to speak on this item, please select the hand icon if you're participating via Zoom. If you are calling in, please press *9. We'll wait about 20 seconds or so to see if we have any speakers. Chair, we do not have any speakers on this item.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. This public hearing is now closed. We'll bring it back to the commission for final review and motion. Would anybody at this point in time like to make a motion with regards to this matter?
I'd like to motion that we approve item number 3, zoning ordinance amendment number 2021-01.
Thank you, Commissioner Wu. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Ramos, thank you. We have a second. All right. Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Yes, Commissioner Alderete,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon, Vice Chair Morrissey,
Yes.
Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin.
Aye.
Motion passes by majority vote with Commissioner Calderon absent.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We'll move on. This is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 4, zoning ordinance amendment number 2021-02. Please note the recommendation on this matter will be forwarded to the City Council at a later date for final determination. Before we begin, does anyone have anything they wish to disclose with regards to this matter on this item? Commissioner Already,
No disclosure.
Commissioner Calderon, Commissioner Morrissey,
I have no disclosures.
Commissioner Fan,
I have nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Ramos.
Yes, just my previous statement. I received the letters that were sent out by the Kennedy Commission on Latino Health Access. And Latino Health Access is one of my employers, but their opinion on this matter will not influence my vote tonight.
Okay, Commissioner Wu.
None whatsoever.
I have none to disclose at this point in time. Ali, please provide your presentation for us.
Chair, if I can just ask that the secretary and also our translator Caesar, please repeat the instruction for accessing Spanish translation again for hearing this item. Thank you.
That's fine. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Min. Yes, to listen to this meeting in English or Spanish, please visit youtube.com/City of Santa Ana videos. There will be 2 videos for you to choose from, English or Spanish. And if you'd like to make a comment, you must do so through Zoom. That link to Zoom is on the agenda, and you will enter meeting ID 952-601-01038. When you would like to comment, please select the hand icon if you are participating via Zoom, or press *9 if you are calling in to make your comment. And I will repeat the call-in number. If you would like to call in, please call 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID, once again, 952-601-01038. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Caesar. So we're set to go.
Can that be said in Spanish, please?
Yes.
César.
Si quieren escuchar la junta en español, puede pasar a youtube.com/City of Santa Ana videos. Hay 2 videos de los que pueden escoger en inglés y en español. Si quieren comentar, pueden hacerlo por Zoom. El ID de Zoom es 952-601-01038. Para comentar en Zoom, levantan la mano con el icono que está en el programa Zoom. Y pueden también, si llaman, pueden marcar *9 para llamar. El número para llamar es 669-900-9128. Y para marcar ahí, para activar la llamada, pueden marcar *9. Una vez más, el ID de Zoom es 952-601-01038.
Thank you, Cesar. Okay, Ali. Let's go on
Thanks,
with
Chairman
the
and
presentation.
Commissioners. This evening, Jerry will present the first part and then I'll close it out.
Okay, Jerry.
Yes, good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Item number 4 is a proposed citywide zoning ordinance amendment in order to amend various sections of Chapter 41 relating to lodging-related land use definitions and reasonable accommodations. With that, staff is recommending that the Plan Commission to recommend to the City Council adoption of an ordinance approving zoning ordinance amendment number 2021-02. I'll leave next slide. Just a quick background as to why staff is proposing this ordinance amendment. Over the couple of years, city has experienced an increased number of complaints from residents and neighborhood associations regarding group living arrangements. Since 2016, code enforcement has received over 50 complaints associated to such uses. And just recapping, these complaints range from issues with regards to noise, parking, trash litter, and secondhand smoke. In addition, the proposed changes are basically required to update the current definitions to be in compliance with state and federal laws to better address group living arrangements. And just to recap, as mentioned at the past couple of meetings, these are the Fair Housing Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, and the Letterman Development Disabilities Act. Next slide, Ali. As mentioned, this ordinance was originally presented to the Plan Commission on April 26th, and a work study session was held on May 10th. During that time, staff did receive feedback from the commission with regards to the proposed boarding house definition. In addition to that, Housing Division did provide information on rental assistance programs, as well as Santa Ana household data. We did receive the feedback from the commission that was provided at the last study session, and we did update the staff report to include additional housing data that Ali will provide later on, more in-depth analysis of that. Next slide, Ali. And just to basically clarify the intent of the ordinance, again, it's kind of divided into two, basically to address and clarify some of the definitions within the Santa Ana Municipal Code that deal with living arrangements in order to better assist the Code Enforcement Division and the Police Department. And then lastly, the second component of this ordinance is to remove the existing reasonable accommodation ordinance from Chapter 41 and then replace that in Chapter 1 as part of a other ordinance amendment that was be proposed to City Council later on this month or next month. And with that, I'll go ahead and lead the presentation to Ali now.
Thanks, Jerry, and good evening, members of the commission again. So as previously stated in past presentations, the proposed ordinance would allow, in concurrence with state law, licensed facilities with 6 or less individuals to be allowed by right. This is required by state law and is a component of this ordinance. Licensed facilities with 7 or more individuals or any unlicensed facility of any size would be subject to the boarding house definition, which I'll provide more detail on later. If operating as a boarding house, facilities providing care to disabled individuals would be able to submit a reasonable accommodation request through the reasonable accommodation process that's outlined in the ordinance, which is contained in the packet for the commission's benefit. It's ordinance amendment number 2021-01. And because it's an ordinance amendment and not a zoning ordinance amendment, it is subject to city council review and approval. So the proposed ordinance, zoning ordinance amendment, would prohibit boarding houses citywide. The boarding house definition would basically be a primary residence or dwelling unit or any portion thereof, where the occupants occupy the residence or unit under 5 or more separate rental agreements. These rental agreements can be either written, oral, or implied. For the purposes of the definition, separate rental agreements for occupancy of accessory dwelling units like ADUs and junior accessory dwelling units like JADUs, either written, oral, or implied, would be counted toward this number. So the proposed boarding house definition would not include or impact different types of accommodations or living. So these are outlined below. Firstly, a residence with 4 or fewer rental agreements, such as homes with 4 or fewer families that share a single residence. It would not impact residences with 4 or few elderly individuals living together under separate rental agreements, smaller unlicensed group living arrangements that may be in operation, as well as commercial transient lodging, such as bed and breakfast or hotels. At the work study session last time on May 10th, we provided some information on housing data. Subsequent to that presentation, we received more specific information from our colleagues in the Housing Division about Santa Ana information, about owner-occupied household sizes based on 2015 to 2019 data. We also received information on the average renter-occupied household size during the same time period, as well as the percent of households with 7 or more individuals from that same time period. That information is presented both in the report and in this PowerPoint, and illustrate that the proposed definition of allowing up to and including 4 separate rental agreements would not affect the vast majority of households for which we have information in the city. So just like the prior zoning ordinance amendment, we also reviewed for CEQA consistency and find that it is not subject to CEQA pursuant to these exemptions afforded by the state CEQA guidelines, and there is no fiscal impact associated with this ordinance. So based on the information in the report and presentation tonight, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council adopt an ordinance approving zoning ordinance amendment number 2021-02. And with that, we would be happy to answer any questions that the commission might have this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Thank you, Jerry. Commissioner Alderetti, do you have any questions of Jerry or Ali?
I do, but I'd request that you come to me at the end.
Okay.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Morrissey?
Yes, I do have a few questions. I was wondering about the definition of actually, I was wondering if the leases or rental agreements are tied to a number of people, or is it just one lease could be any number of people? We're talking about in homes of 4 or less leases.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So for the purpose of the ordinance and the proposed definition, rental agreement is silent as to whether it be for one individual or for a group of individuals like a family. So it's not tied to any sort of number. It could be 1 or it could be more.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. Is there anything that ties the number of leases to number of bedrooms?
Thank you and no. The definition simply proposes the number of rental agreements, but it's not tying them to any sort of bedroom or other area of a residence.
Okay, thanks for that. I might have a couple more questions, but I'll defer to other.
We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you, Vice Chair Morrissey.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Fan.
Thank you, Ali. The definition of a household, is that one household per rental agreement? So the rental agreement would include anybody that is defined within a household?
Commissioner Pham, I apologize. Your connection broke up during a critical piece of your question. Could you repeat it?
Sorry. I saw that a household is defined as anyone within the immediate family, I guess. And so would it be one lease per household? Is that one way of looking at it?
Thank you, Commissioner. So according to the proposed ordinance that's before you this evening, household would be defined as a household means all the individuals occupying a dwelling. So think of it as like a collective definition of everyone in the dwelling. So kind of going back to the Vice Chair's question, the rental agreement would be for an individual or it could be for multiple individuals that are subject to a rental agreement. So that could be.
That would define a household.
No. So it could be basically one person, or it could be like a couple, or it could be a couple with their children. The collectivity of those, let's say like 2 of those rental agreement situations would apply in the household definition. Household meaning all the individuals occupying a dwelling.
No, understood. Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner Fan?
Nothing at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ramos.
Yes, I have a few questions for staff, specifically on the data that was presented to us on the average household size. I'm wondering what the data source is for that and how that compares to the average household size of the households in Santa Ana that applied for the emergency rental assistance program.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramos. For that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Judson Brown in the Housing Division. Judson, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Ramos. The data that we presented to you in the presentation and the data that you see in your staff report is American Community Survey data between 2015 and 2019. Regarding the additional data that you're seeking, we would have to come back and provide that information at a later date.
Thank you. And I ask because I know that the US Census data and ACS data is what is available and what's easiest to access and present. I am concerned with that data source because we know that in Santa Ana, there are, just as we went through this 2020 census effort, there are a lot of hard to count census tracts in Santa Ana. And a big part of that is because we have a lot of individuals that still have fears of participating in the census, perhaps around their immigration status, or because they live in very overcrowded housing conditions. So I don't think that the data that we're being presented reflects the reality of the living conditions in Santa Ana, specifically the number of individuals per household. And I asked for the number of individuals per household of those that applied for emergency rental assistance, because I think that that might be a little more accurate, a little more representative of the reality, especially what we see now. Thinking post-pandemic and the way in which the economic stability of many households has been affected, which may have actually increased overcrowding in more ways than we know. And those are all my comments for the time being.
Okay, Commissioner Wu.
I just want to clarify that basically, if they don't fit the license category, it falls into a broad category of boarding house.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's correct.
So with that thought in mind, no language that I read say you are discriminating against a class of people or economic level. Am I correct?
Correct, Commissioner. This ordinance is intended to be facially neutral in that regard.
Okay, then my other question regarding how you go about enforcing it. We know that in various neighborhoods, sometimes the owner of record rents to a renter who then goes about, without the homeowner's knowledge, rent out to other people. How is that? What category do they fall under?
Thank you, Commissioner. So they would still fall in the event that they, under the proposed ordinance, in the event that that situation still had multiple rental agreements, and that number of rental agreements exceeded the number 4, so it was 5 or more, they would still be subject to the boarding house definition.
So the teeth in your ordinance is basically a number, a size of a number of renters.
Correct. The two important aspects here are the number, as you're highlighting, as well as the use of the term rental agreement, rather than, let's say, lease, because in the situation that you're describing, when you have an owner renting to one individual who then may sublet to multiple individuals, the term rental agreement is meant to be more broadly encompassing to address these scenarios.
So people who find themselves in housing shortage, they're not being discriminated against being able to access, since there are low-income housing available that currently are that been built is unoccupied. Then those residential units that are being used for rental, they are available for rental as well. the limitation being that we're sitting at the number 4. So we're not saying that you can't do it.
Correct. The boarding house definition would allow the multiple rental agreement scenario to take place up to and including 4 rental agreements.
Right. And I'm also wondering about the lodge. I know that there are the census data and American Survey supplements that the data on people who are seeking rental assistance, I'm not sure if that really is an accurate record, because sometimes there might be a number, and I would not know what that number would be, of people who are applying for rental assistance that may later have to pay it back because they're not qualified for that rental assistance because they can't show that they rent something. So, you know, I'm not sure how accurate that would be, and is that a government measure?
Thank you. So is your question about where the source of the data is, or
Yeah. So you picked a more conservative one, which is the American Survey, or you're going to use the census, or you're going to use your housing authority information at some point, right?
For that, I'd like to again turn it over to Judson Brown, just so that he can elucidate a little bit more.
Yeah, Commissioner Wu, I appreciate you asking that question and your perspective on that question, because the data that we provided from our emergency rental assistance program was never meant to or supposed to be used as the primary data source for regarding this proposed amendment. That was never the purpose. And there are data sources that are much more reliable, much more that are widely used and accepted based on census data, American Community Survey data, that are used in these kind of cases. And so what you are seeing tonight is the official data that we are proposing, we are including as part of our recommendation. But I would point back to the emergency rental assistance program as only anecdotal information, if anything. It was never supposed to be taken out of context as the city's official data source for the justification of this amendment.
Yeah, and I'm trying to follow the train of thought that staff been crafting this to making sure that we were not being punitive or discriminatory, and you took into consideration the feedback we gave you. What I'm looking at is trying to avoid extrapolating things. While I may feel a extreme sense of injustice by the creation of privatization by those that have too much money and are hoarding it, that is not the issue before me tonight. The issue before me tonight is looking at how do you define boarding houses and how do you set some standards there. And that's what I'm trying to clarify. And I'm not trying to argue against another point of thought, but I just want to keep my thought in the clarity of what the policy issue is and what it is not. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alan. Commissioner Alderetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I apologize if some of these questions have been asked before, but I think it's important that the public have the benefit of hearing at least some of them. So the first question I had is, are the complaints from the 50 discrete, are the complaints that we received, the 50 total, from discrete individuals that are specifically connected to group homes, or are they more maybe accurately described as general code enforcement complaints? And I'm asking because I'm trying to see if we're getting these from sort of 1 or 2 or 3 vexatious complainers, which, by the way, the city has a lot of experience with. And I just can't remember if that's ever been answered.
Thank you, Commissioner. So to answer your question, just off the bat, the source of a code enforcement complaint is often confidential, so we can't give away too much information that would reveal who's calling in. But with that understanding, what I can say is that the information that I was made privy to shows that the complaints are not coming from a concentrated source of one or several individuals, that they are, distributed throughout the city from various sources and about various topics specifically stemming from certain boarding house operations, like debris and trash, like secondhand smoke, like excess vehicle parking or noise, or propensity for like altercations with neighbors, let's say, lack of property maintenance and oversight. So those are like the thematic components of the complaints, how they tie to what ultimately was determined to have been like a boarding house or an unlicensed group living facility, and then not concentrated from any one or small source of complaints.
Right. Okay. No, that helps. I wasn't sure if there was a nexus with group homes or just sort of complaints generally. So the next question I have is, if the commission did not adopt the proposed amendment and deleted the existing accommodations ordinance in its entirety, would we be out of compliance with the FHA, the ADA, or the Lanterman Act?
So I'll let the legal technicality be answered by John Funk, but what I can say is every jurisdiction is required to have some sort of reasonable accommodations process for handling requests for a reasonable accommodation that's stemming from an individual's disability status. So it could be as simple as needing a blue curb painted in front of their house, which is a very common type of request, all the way up to something more complex, stemming from a specific disability situation with a family member. So every jurisdiction has to have that sort of process in place. Now, whether a deletion without a replacement immediately would result in not being in compliance, John Funk, I'm not sure if you have any insight on that.
Can I ask just an intervening question, which is, if we could deal with the common issues mentioned in the staff report, like requests for additional driveway widths or painting curbs blue, would that then sort of ameliorate the compliance with the acts? So I just thought I'd mention that now so that John has like kind of my thinking of where I'm going.
Thank you for your question, Commissioner Alderete. To echo what Ali said, that the deletion of the current reasonable accommodation scheme alone, I don't believe would put us out of compliance, provided that we continue to maintain that process for anyone who is seeking relief in the form of a reasonable accommodation from our code. It is certainly helpful to have those protocols in writing, and I would recommend it. But the important part of the chief emphasis is on the availability of that process. But again, it is helpful to have those in writing. So, and I would continue to recommend that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. So I guess so the impetus for my question is really, I'm trying to understand why existing code enforcement and public health laws couldn't address the issues that are specific to, say, these 50 complaints. That's really like the overarching question.
And those would commonly continue to be addressed by the mechanisms provided by our code. I know the nuisance abatement and other standards set by our code would continue to govern those, those situations.
Right. So this is specifically just for the reasonable accommodation aspect that we don't have now. Is that fair to say?
We do have a reasonable accommodation protocol now, and that is applicable across the board. The intention here is to move the reasonable accommodation protocols into a more general section of the ordinance to clarify that it is applicable across the board to any relief being sought from a code on the basis of disability.
Got it. No, that explains it. And then just one final question for now. I was listening to Commissioner Wu's comments, and I was wondering if, does a facially neutral ordinance mean that you necessarily end up with a facially neutral application of the statute?
That is certainly the intent. Facially neutral and it's and the outcome or expectations upon the application of a facially neutral ordinance can vary, and you know, those are depending on what the results are. Those can be challenged if the application of the ordinance proves to be less neutral than the facial component of it. If that makes sense.
No, I guess, yes, it does, because there are many laws that purport to be facially neutral, but in application, they're discriminatory. And I just thought I'd mention that because it is really difficult to put an ordinance together of any sort that ends up being facially, that is facially neutral, but then in the application, you don't really know. And that's why there's lawsuits to test the application. So I just wanted to hear you respond to that, and that makes eminent sense to me. Mr. Chairman, that's it for my questions for now.
Okay. Does anybody else want to make any comments or questions at this point in time with staff? We'll go back to Thomas. Tom?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm at a meeting.
So I
hold on. All right. Mama.
Okay.
Can
you hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. It seems like you know, the preface of the ordinance noted that there have been increasing health and safety concerns with the GOAs, including parking complaints, police service calls, et cetera. And it seems like we're doing more in the leases from up to 4 people to increase the number of people potentially living in homes that may or may not be designed for that in terms of safety. And I don't see any triggering mechanism for if people start performing or initiating these leases to initiate any sort of inspection or permit to essentially go into business. I think that was brought up last meeting. You know, the question is, are these people becoming businesses if they're leasing out rooms? So my concern is both for the safety of the occupants. Are there enough smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, so on and so forth, adequate exiting? And for our first responders, police, fire, you know, walking into, you know, increased fire risk, puts our firefighters at risk, increase in conflict, our police have to respond to that. So I don't see how this is increasing the safety, health, safety, and welfare of our neighborhoods and a lot of the people who live in them. So I guess my question is, how are we addressing those issues?
Ali?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'll approach it from this angle. I'll say that right now, the zoning code does not have a definition for boarding house. So the proposed definition is a brand new definition. What is it intended to do is the root of this entire effort is multifaceted. Number one, it's to update and relocate the reasonable accommodation ordinance, as we were discussing earlier. The other root of it is to basically get a grasp in many ways on boarding houses that are operating as facilities that are unlicensed for a variety of purposes, like a facility for alcohol and drug rehabilitation, or a facility for some other sort of congregate living that normally would be subject to state licensure, but because of loopholes in various state laws allow unlicensed facilities to operate. And because we don't even have a boarding house definition, and because our zoning code provisions on what is a licensed facility, what's a care facility, and all those sort of things is largely out of date, right now our mechanisms to even identify and regulate or allow or enforce are much more difficult than if we had an updated ordinance, including a boarding house definition, to even give the city an ability that if a complaint is submitted about an unlicensed or a facility operating in a neighborhood, to even investigate it and see, first of all, is it licensed or is it unlicensed? If it's licensed, if it's according, licensure is up to date and it's operating in accordance with state law, then that's just state law. But if it's unlicensed, to at least notify the owner and the operator and give them an opportunity to come into compliance with the options that they would have. Those options could be becoming licensed, or those options could be not meeting the boarding house definition, or if caring for individuals with disabilities, submitting a reasonable accommodation request for independent evaluation. But right now, without these definitions and without this update, the city's ability to do what I just described is more limited than it would be if this ordinance were adopted and implemented.
Yeah, I appreciate I understand the over 5 definitions and the license and the unlicensed and licensed. It's the under 5 that is largely broad and unregulated that I see potentially being an issue. There's just no, 4 leases, and it's not tied to the number of bedrooms or number of people. It's hard to say how many people we're talking about and what's going to happen with that. I think it's potentially a safety issue that's maybe, we talked about unintended consequences. I think everything we've done here, with the exception of that, makes a lot of sense. I just think that facet of the ordinance doesn't seem to work in terms of health and safety. I think the other question I had is the reasonable accommodation ordinance. So we have 2 ordinances here we're approving. Or do they both go together, or can one be approved without the other? Can the reasonable accommodation be approved without the boarding house ordinance?
So Vice Chair, thank you. Firstly, what I'd like to offer is that we do have Code Enforcement Division Manager Alvaro Nunez on the line, as well as John Funk, who can offer a little bit more insight as to why the boarding house definition does not tie the rental agreements to like bedrooms or living rooms or other areas per se. There are some challenges with doing so. But if you choose to wish to seek clarification on that, we can revisit that in a moment. But to go back to your second question, you are being asked to recommend to the City Council adoption of zoning ordinance amendment number 2021-2. That ordinance is a single ordinance that would update the definitions in the zoning code relating to these sort of lodging related land use definitions, and would also delete the reasonable accommodations ordinance from the zoning code. In order to then reenact the reasonable accommodations ordinance in Chapter 1 of the municipal code, the City Council would have to then adopt ordinance amendment number 2021-1 to basically readopt and update that in a separate chapter. Because that's not in the zoning code, it's not the review of the Planning Commission. It's just the City Council, but it was included in your packet nonetheless, just so that the commissioners could see the holistic effort that's before you this evening.
Okay, so the 2021-02 would happen first, and then 2021-01 would be adopted second, but they go together as a package.
Correct. So if the commission were to recommend approval of this zoning ordinance amendment before you this evening, then when this goes to City Council, think of ordinance amendment 2021-1 kind of merging in from the right and joining it on the same freeway to City Council.
So yeah, I guess I didn't have much of a question for code enforcement because I saw the, the under 5 leases. It seemed like we're allowing it along with, and we're not tying it to number of bedrooms or number of people. So it would all be codified essentially. So, if you have an overcrowded condition, I'm not too up on my occupancy, allowed occupancy in residential, in residences, but it looked like we're opening it up to a lot of people living together who don't necessarily know each other. There's a lot of unknowns, potential for conflict there that creates safety issues. So I was hoping I would have a solution to that, but I'm not really sure I have one at this time. So I was open to discussion on that.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Hallie, does Alvaro want to present it at this point in time, or just we'll hold him for questions?
Alvaro, do you have any other information about, rental agreements in bedrooms versus non-bedroom areas, or any standby information?
So, to the extent that regarding life safety concerns, right, without limiting the number of folks allowed to be in a home, we still have to abide by the health and safety sections that the state provides, and in any case law regarding occupancy, especially in residential properties. That said, we're still mindful as far as life safety concerns, right? We would address that like in any other traditional code enforcement aspects. That's never compromised, right? So independent of the occupancy levels, we'll still safeguard that we ensure that folks have the proper egress, as you indicated, that the safety concerns regarding smoke detectors are available, especially when we conduct our rental enforcement inspections. And so that's always key for us, right? That's never an issue that is compromised. So other than that, and confirmation that they're abiding by any land use and other health and safety, housing compatibility aspects, this allows us a more comprehensive approach. So it's never, when we make inspections in residential, we apply whatever codes addresses the item of concern, whether it be the building code, the health and safety section, or the zoning requirements, right? And always for the preservation of the life safety concerns.
Okay, thank you, Alvaro. Does anyone else have any other questions of staff at this point in time?
I do, and I believe I've had my hand raised the longest. Thank you, Chair McLaughlin. I do have a couple questions of staff. The first is following on Commissioner Alderete's questions and comments. So I want to think through what this policy would look like if approved and then implemented. So can we walk through what that would look like? Let's say I call code enforcement because I suspect that the house next door is a boarding house. What would come next? And this might be directed at Alvaro or anyone else who wants to walk through the process with me.
Alvaro?
I'd like to stab at that.
Actually, Commissioner
Alan,
Buchan, I finished asking my questions and comments.
The question.
Okay.
Commissioner Ramos and Alan, please. At this point in time,
Let me address that issue. So as the director of the department, I'm also in charge of ensuring that our code and regulations are applied in a fair and equitable way. Having said that, the practice that we employ for enforcement as most other majority of cities throughout California and throughout the country is one that is generally responsive to community concerns. Upon receiving a community concerns, we take the opportunity to ensure that we look into and investigate the situation prior to taking any action. It is a requirement that we investigate and verify. However, we also take the opportunity to educate the public about what the law is and what the law allows and what the regulations provides for, and counsel the potential violator, not violator, but potential, because it's allegation of what the regulations indicate. And that would allow an education opportunity for someone who potentially is alleged of a situation to address those issues. We also work with the property owner to advise of the city's process on how to address compliance. So we take steps that involves notification, both could be formally or through a meeting or through a phone conversation. And that is our approach in the initial contact on investigating the complaint. And if the complaint is verified, again, we continue to take the approach of providing notice to the owner of the specific, or to the owner as well as the occupant, as the specific of what the violation is and what the correction measure is required. And again, that is a process also, one of notification, providing opportunity for voluntary compliance, and go through that process. You know, and some cases often, you know, will be voluntary compliance by the owner and by the occupants. There are instances when we don't get the cooperations of property owner or occupants, and the legal process, there is a due process that we have to follow in order to investigate should we not receive any cooperation from a property owner and or occupant. And that is when we would have to escalate and go through a due process where we seek legal authority to inspect and verify. And at that point, if there is verification of a violation, we will work with the owner again, and occupant again, to address the code violation.
Thank you. So in a case where it has been verified that there are that there are 5 or more leases at a residential address, and notice is provided, and now occupants are being asked to leave and may not have any other affordable housing options and may be at risk of homelessness, does the city have a plan in place to also provide assistance to those families and households that could be displaced as a result of this policy if implemented?
So the compliant process offer a few different options, as previously mentioned. First is for voluntary compliance, where the owner can work with the city and address the issues of concern. Second is the ability to go through the process of applying for a reasonable accommodation under the reasonable accommodation process. Or thirdly is to comply by going through the state and obtain the ability to operate a licensed facility. So that is the way that compliance could potentially be reached under the existing framework. In terms of assistance, the city has a variety of assistance to all our residents for housing concern, including emergency situation. And I will let Judson from our housing division describe more of the services on that issue.
Okay, and before Judson responds to that, I want to ask a clarifying question regarding reasonable accommodations. For a residential address with 5 or more leases that wants to receive that reasonable accommodation to be to not be considered a boarding house, they would need to meet certain criteria, correct? And a lot of that criteria to receive a reasonable accommodation revolves around perhaps a disability status or other specific statuses that one would need to have to receive that. And I ask that because I want to understand, and I want everybody to understand, whether or not any landlord that has several leases in a home could access that reasonable accommodation if no one at that address is a person with a disability or any other criteria that may exist. Because I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what a reasonable accommodation is and how one can have access to that and what the criteria for that is. And I don't know if Mr. Funk would like to answer that or who is most comfortable with that.
Of course. Thanks for the question, Commissioner Ramos. That is really a case-by-case basis and highly dependent on the facts of each situation. Our code, either as it stands presently or as it would be amended by the accompanying ordinance, would lay out the protocol and the procedure for it, but it really is dependent upon the facts of each situation. It's really not possible to kind of preordain, whether the accommodation would be extended or not. It's upon the evaluation of the factors that are contained in our ordinance.
Thank you. And then I have 1 or 2 more questions, and I'll allow other commissioners to continue with their questions. So my next question is just to clarify. Right now, we are considering any residential address with 5 or more leases for that address to be a boarding house with the language that we're considering as of now.
Commissioner, that's correct. 5 or more.
5 or more, okay. So 4 leases would be the maximum allowed as of now.
Correct. Just for clarification, 4 rental agreements, correct?
4 rental agreements, thank you. And then my last question or comment or both is that I know that the city will be starting their housing element roundtable meetings next week, actually next Wednesday. And those meetings will happen on a weekly basis for 4 weeks throughout the month of June. And I'm wondering if we're getting ahead of ourselves by considering this now. I'm wondering if this is an item that should go to those roundtable discussions where the housing element will be considered. And the housing element also considers our zoning. And I've said this before, that I am concerned that this policy could be considered an impediment to fair housing because I do view it as restrictive zoning. And I know I've asked about it and staff has said that they don't share that concern. But I'm wondering if this is a conversation that should also be taken to the roundtable. Well, I think it should be, but I want to see what staff's opinions are on that, and if staff that will be facilitating those conversations has thought of that. Because I do think that this is something that we should consider along with our housing element.
We are taking up, as you're correct, the housing element update comprehensively, and our kickoff meeting will be next week. The issues of affordable housing is something that we will work with our consultant and our update team to complete a comprehensive housing needs assessment to identify all housing issues in our city. And through that process and through the roundtable process, we will also be identifying any additional issues that industry and housing stakeholders in our community wants to share as well. And through that process, all issues relating to housing will be addressed. In this instance, we believe, and there's a request for us to review these types of regulations and to propose regulations that can help to address this issue in the meantime. The issue here really is about a use of a dwelling and the number of rental agreement that we are defining as to when it becomes a boarding house that needs additional review and oversight. It is not prohibiting or in any way trying to address either overcrowding or the number of people or the number of occupants inside a dwelling. It does not do that in any way. It simply regulate housing on the number of rental agreements before requiring additional oversight to ensure that the issues of whether or not a dwelling is meeting with our standards of living, our standard for neighborhood enjoyment, our standard for housing is met in order for us to continue to provide a safe and decent housing environment for our residents.
Thank you. And I understand the intent of the language that we're being presented. But I do think we need to all remember how this will also affect housing, and how this will directly impact individuals that are in dire need of affordable housing and that have created their own affordable housing. So I think we need to think about those two things, because I don't think they can be separated. And those are all my comments and questions as of now. I'm sure I'll have more after I hear the commissioners and after I hear members of the public that have joined us tonight.
Commissioner Wu.
The regular zoning in the general plan that we will be doing will define whether you're R1, R2, light industrial and all that. Those still will be an existing guiding the option. None of that is under the consideration. The consideration just defines that if you don't fit in the licensed facility, you fall into this boarding house situation with multiple leases. Now, how someone lives as a good neighbor may be what is in reality when neighborhood groups complain about a unit. They're not complaining because of the race of the person. They're not complaining because of the economic status. They're complaining because they illegally constructed something in the back that's like a chicken coop, and then someone's living in there with a indoor electrical plug going in there to provide electricity to a unit that had not gone through a permit. So the complaint would go through, I take code enforcement through the building code to look at whether they had a permit, were those things illegal. None of that really was motivated by looking at the size and number of people living there, because we have very large families. And we may have extended families living with us, and we do understand that from neighborhood perspective. So it's like, what kind of neighbor? It could be that they're also burning trash that's getting into the house next door, or they're beating up their kids, which you would be mindful to call a social worker. Those are the complaints I think sometimes we see more coming up from neighborhood meetings of residents that talk about a house in the neighborhood, and they're not looking at the size. Although we do want to hold homeowners and renters accountable for being a compatible neighborhood. So I think that looking at the social issues aside on affordable housing, which there is a problem, looking at the economic inequity, which there is a problem, that's not the intent, I think, of separating the housing unit. Is to be less discriminatory, actually, to not fall into punishing people because they want to set up a boarding house situation. It only says that it limited to 4 leases. In those 4 leases, you could have 4 families. I don't know their family size, but they could fall under those 4 leases, as long as that their property is zoned for multiple dwelling or I don't know how you will regulate that. So those are the things that I'm just kind of looking at in enacting the policy, and whether this solves the other things that will bubble up from the housing element or the general plan, which I don't think it will be addressing that. There are existing things on the books already, which neighborhood groups know very well, and they do use that when they complain. But they're not motivated by anything else other than that. And that's from attending those meeting and hearing stuff.
Anything else, Commissioner Wu?
No, I'm ready to act on it.
Okay, Commissioner Fan.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Vice Chair Morrissey's idea about whether or not, potentially these agreements needs to be tied to bedrooms, because the more I listen to the discussions, I'm wondering if we do in fact recommend the approval of this amendment with a specific number of leases, or no, sorry, of rental agreements, if that potentially puts us in conflict with the IRC's definition of bedrooms, because let's say we define that 4 leases or a specific number of rental agreement is acceptable, right at the moment it's 4, and we have a potential dwelling that has only 3 bedrooms, and one could extrapolate that maybe the dining room is used as a bedroom as well, to count 4 separate. However, the IRC defines a bedroom as a room that at a minimum requires a window that is that's made for egress at a minimum 20-inch wide, 24-inch high, 44-inch from the ground, right? So I'm wondering, are we opening ourselves up for potential conflict with the building code if we are if we're defining the number of rental agreements, and then that basically applies to a host of different houses, a host of different room numbers, right? If it's a 5-bedroom house, that's great. But if it's a 3-bedroom house or a 2-bedroom house, and potentially we are defining it's acceptable for 4 separate rental agreements, then one could imagine that there are other rooms within the house that are used as bedrooms, which are most likely not code compliant.
Commissioner Bowles, in this particular situation, we are dealing with a zoning standard. When you talk about occupancy and occupancy determination, the building code actually and health and safety code will take precedent over the zoning code on this issue, and therefore the building regulations would be the one that dictates the maximum occupancy of any particular space, either for habitation or other commercial or industrial purpose. The purpose here is not to do that. The zoning code that's not the function of the zoning code in this instance. And that is not the goal here as well. The goal here, again, I want to refocus us to define at what point in the number rental agreement do we believe that would require a landlord to obtain additional approval before being able to have additional rental agreements. We are strictly dealing with a use of a building rather than the occupancy, who's occupying it, how it is occupied. And so all of that has other building and health and safety codes to define and to regulate. The purpose here is not necessary to do that, but strictly just deal with a zoning standard and a definition of a boarding house.
Right. I guess the main reason why I kind of brought up that very specific detail is that I think that it feels to me like we are debating whether or not to keep the number 4 or to increase the number or potentially not have a number. And my feeling is if we were to have a number, I would be comfortable with the number 4, but I don't think we should pursue a number greater than that, because it opens ourselves up to a host of other issues that to contend with. That's essentially kind of my viewpoint on the matter.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner Fowl.
Yeah, I have a comment as well.
Go ahead,
Um,
Commissioner Morrissey.
Yeah, I'm along the lines of thinking of Commissioner Pham. I think state law says, for instance, in a 1-bedroom place, it's the 2+1 rule, where you can have 2 occupants in a bedroom plus 1 lease or leaser or agreement. So that's kind of the minimum that's already allowed by law. And then beyond that, if we're going to allow additional leases, I think everything's interconnected. So to disconnect zoning laws, people purchase their homes in a neighborhood because of the current state of affairs in terms of occupancy. So I think we should start thinking about tying the number of leases to the zoning, which goes back to what Commissioner Ramos is saying. Let's think about this with our general plan and how we're going to tackle this. I think there are a lot of issues here especially with parking. If we're going to start allowing leases to multiple families and homes, how are we regulating parking? It's already a big issue in our neighborhoods. So there's still some issues that need to be fleshed out here, perhaps the roundtable. So that's my comment on that issue.
Anything else, Commissioner Morrissey?
No, not at the moment. Thank you.
Commissioner Alderete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep my comments brief because some of them are repetitive, but I can't really fathom tying this to people, the number of people or the number of rooms. I think that is the question I asked earlier was about whether the existing code enforcement ordinances and the public health laws allow us to do that. And I think they do. When there's issues of public safety, the city can go in and does go in and can file a notice of violation recorded against the property and fine the property owner or the landowner. The other issue I think is there are a lot of reasons why people and neighborhood groups make complaints. I don't think we can know what those are, what truly motivates those. Is it racial animus? Sure. Is it quality of life? Sure. But we don't really know why people call. And I think back in 2006, the city had 300 complaints from one person in a year's time period. I'd be hard pressed to believe that those were all done for a proper purpose. And so I don't think we can know that. Litigation might show what that is through depositions and other forms of discovery. But I think for me, I do agree with Commissioner Morrissey that it's always been my gut reaction that this still seems a little bit half-baked. And so I would ask staff, is there any reason why we have to do this now, why we would have to approve this ordinance now, other than the fact that the city council is going to consider it on, I think it's June 21st. Is there like a state deadline for this?
No, there isn't a legal requirement for the city to do this.
Okay. Anyway, that's my comments, and that's just the one question I had. I think we should at some point, there's a lot of people waiting to be heard, so maybe we can hear from them.
Well, I want to ask Min on this. June 21st has been established as a date that it goes in front of the council. Is there anything compelling that situation at this point in time, other than somebody has targeted it as a June 21st agenda item for the council?
That is a targeted date, agendized item for the council.
Okay.
As agendized by staff, correct.
So there's nothing that's compelling this discussion to move forward.
As I indicated, there's no legal requirement that compelled the expedited date or for that particular date period.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission at this point in time?
I'd like to make one last comment. If you add a lot of things onto the simple dot of this thing about the leasing, you're adding on more and you're really defining and you're leaving people out. And I think that to look at it simply, you have to look at the face value of that, and that other building codes are still in effect, other zoning codes and land uses are in effect. So this is a land use definition. That's all that it is. All the other issues we've been bringing up, like what happens if, you know, and that's not there yet. No.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Wu. Anyone else would like to speak at this point in time? All right. Hearing none, Madam Secretary, have we received any written communication on this item?
Yes, 2 letters were received. Those letters were distributed to the commission, and those are also posted on our website.
Okay. At this point in time, the public hearing is now open. And since we do not have anyone, do not have an applicant at this point to speak on this matter, we will open it to the public. Madam Secretary, please open to the public.
Thank you. If you'd like to speak on this item, please select the hand icon if you're participating via Zoom, or if you're calling in, please press *9. Once you are called upon by either your name or your phone number that is listed, please announce your first and last name for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. I will alert you when your time is up. So, Citlali Ruiz, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you for presenting this to the public. My name is Citlali Ruiz. I'm a youth resident and youth organizer here in the city of Santa Ana. And I just want to really disapprove and really encourage the Planning Commission to not vote on this and present it to City Council. One, the city of Santa Ana is still lacking on supporting residents with affordable housing. They've done a moderate job during the pandemic, but we know after this pandemic, we know it's going to continue being the same. And the city of Santa Ana is not prepared if this does get passed. The city of Santa Ana is not prepared to house families or single folks into apartments, right? So I think the Planning Commission really should think about the residents of Santa Ana. Y'all live in Santa Ana, right? Or live in houses of your own where you have the privilege to have a family rooms, right? That you don't have to share with people, right? And so unfortunately, this isn't the situation for a lot of families here in Santa Ana due to the increase of the rent in apartments, right? Mobile homes, houses, no matter what situation they're in, rent is not affordable here in the city of Santa Ana. So I highly encourage this planning commission to really hear what the residents of Santa Ana, the people that live in these situations, y'all need to hear us and hear our experiences. Unless the city of Santa Ana opens more affordable housing apartments where these individuals can afford to live in permanently, not like temporarily, but it has to be permanent. So unless the city of Santa Ana is ready to head towards that way, then we hope that these applications can be open to them. But until then, the city of Santa Ana is not ready to hold these type of ordinance or push, right? So with that, that's my time, and I really hope the planning commission votes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luis. Next.
Thank you. Next caller, Carla Juarez, please speak now.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Carla Juárez y yo soy residente de Santa Ana y también soy una organizadora de la comunidad. Vivo en el distrito 4 y he estado en Santa Ana más de 30 años y sé porque tengo el privilegio de conocer a la ciudad y de tener tiempo para poder estar en estas juntas que varias de mis colegas y vecinos y vecinas no pueden. Sé que Santa Ana tiene el mayor porcentaje que rentan, que es más del 50%. Este tipo de ordenanza va a criminalizar a las personas que tienen bajos ingresos, que por razón de necesidad, no porque quieren, pero por necesidad, viven con otras familias. Yo propongo que la energía en que ustedes están tomando en desplazar a las personas, mejor se vaya a crear cooperativas de vivienda. Es decir, que el dueño que está haciendo negocio, rentando estos lugares, crea mejor una cooperativa y que esta cooperativa sea para los inquilines que viven en esa propiedad. Su ordenanza lo que va a hacer es va a desplazar a muchas personas. Si no desplaza a las personas, va a criminalizar a las personas. El propietario no le va a dar un acuerdo por tal de no que esta ordenanza no le afecte. Y sin ese contrato, el inquilino y la inquilina no va a tener ninguna protección. Aún así, no hay protecciones para inquilines. Pero sin ningún contrato, peor va a ser la situación. Van a poner en riesgo a las familias de Santa Ana. Las familias que son trabajadoras y trabajadores esenciales que pueden terminar en la calle. Yo urjo que no pasen esta ordenanza. Mejor crean cooperativas de vivienda, ya que Santa Ana tiene mucho espacio. Lotes baldíos públicos. Gracias.
Cesar, please translate.
Good evening. My name is Carla Juarez, and I'm a Santa Ana resident, a community organizer, a resident of Ward 4. I've been living in Santa Ana for over 30 years, and this is very important. We need to protect the city. The city of Santa Ana has 50%, over 50% of Santa Ana residents are renters. And this ordinance, what will do is it will marginalize low-income people. And the people who don't want to but need to live with other families. And the energy you are going to use to displace these people, you better use this energy to create housing cooperatives so that the landlords create cooperatives that are owned and managed by the tenants, the renters. And this ordinance is going to displace people or is going to criminalize them. And the landlords are not going to give agreements, rental agreements to these people. because they would not want to face this, be affected by this new ordinance. They won't give a contract to the people, to the renters, and therefore the renters will not be protected. Therefore, you're going to be putting Santa Ana families at risk. And these are the essential workers who may end up in the streets. So please don't pass this ordinance. We have empty lots and we can create these cooperatives.
Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you. Next caller is listed here as CEA guest. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't change my name, but my name is Hilda Ortiz. I'm calling on behalf of Latino Health Access tonight to urge you to oppose the amendment proposed under item number 4 today. Having access and being able to use data can be very powerful, especially when you are in a position to be able to make decisions that affect an entire community. So I'd like to invite you today to review the data presented on this item with a different lens. Staff presented the reasoning behind this proposal on the definition of boarding houses due to the 50 code enforcement complaints since 2016. That's an average of 10 per year, which seems like a very low amount. There's not much code enforcement data publicly available for comparison, but I was able to see that the city of Costa Mesa, for example, has over 3,000 complaints per year. So it seems like this proposal merits a deeper analysis into the connection between the problem and the proposed solution and whether it's needed in the first place. And now, assuming that the amount is significant in the increase of complaints, then we invite you to analyze the root of the issue. Some of it the staff has already provided. These complaints are a result of an increase in group living arrangements in our city. We know that Santa Ana has majority renters who are very low and extremely low income residents. The majority of these households are families. And we also know that even in these conditions, families are rent burdened, with over 60% of them using more than 1/3 of their income on rent. So families are living in these conditions because they have no other choice. And even so, they're struggling, particularly after the pandemic. So looking at this data in a different lens, we at LHA see a community that is living in housing conditions that are keeping them at the border between being housed and unhoused. So while the city may be trying to address an issue, this punitive approach would only allow for these already economically burdened families to be cited and criminalized rather than provide housing opportunities that don't force families to live like this in the first place. Because when you provide no other options for families but to live in overcrowded dwellings, and then you prohibit those same types of dwellings, then you are directly attacking those families, whether it's the intent or not. So our families have been significantly impacted by the pandemic and are facing uncertainty in housing more than ever. We urge you tonight to oppose the proposed amendment and instead focus on the priority of exploring the creation of new land use opportunities, policies, and programs that will increase new affordable housing for Santa Ana's low-income families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next caller, Jesus Santana. Please go ahead. You will have 3 minutes.
Hello, thank you. Good evening, Commission, Chairman, and community members watching at home. My name is Jesus Santana, a current Ward 2 resident who is calling to implore that you oppose this zoning ordinance proposal. In the last 2 to 3 years, I've been supporting, engaging, and taking into consideration the struggles and experiences of residents who reside in the Sullivan community. To be specific, I've been supporting the Sullivan and Acción group, a resident-led group that is currently trying to address the housing issues of community members living within First Street to McFadden and Sullivan Street to Fairview. It's a community composed of mobile homes, condominiums, apartments, and single-family homes, most of who are renters. This community for years has been dealing with the issues of overcrowding, cohesion, parking, poor living conditions, and more importantly, the lack of support from management and property owners, and unfortunately, from the city. With that being said, until we are able to gather input from families and communities who will be severely affected by this proposal, I would recommend supporting our families and communities under the extremely low income umbrella that is unfortunately being targeted and excluded. I thank you for your time, and I really urge and implore that y'all make sure you take into consideration community input before deciding on their lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesus.
Next caller, Sarai. Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Sarai, please unmute yourself. Okay, we'll go to the next caller. We'll come back to her. Next caller is Araceli Robles. Please unmute yourself. You will have 3 minutes.
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Araceli Robles. Mi nombre es Araceli Robles. Me dieron la palabra a mí.
¿Sí?
Sí. Mi nombre es Araceli Robles. Yo vivo aquí en la ciudad de Santana y estoy escuchando toda la reunión y estoy un poco preocupada porque lamentablemente las personas que trabajan en la ciudad están usando una data donde en vez de beneficiar a la comunidad nos están perjudicando. ¿Dónde van a quedar la familia número 5, la familia número 6? Van a quedar sin vivienda. A ninguna familia nos gusta compartir la vivienda. Les aseguro que a ustedes tampoco. Pero lamentablemente las rentas están muy altas. No podemos pagar solo las rentas.
Perdón.
Por favor, yo les suplico. No es más, no les suplico. Es su obligación atender y cuidar a la comunidad. Usar la data para beneficio, no contra la comunidad, porque eso hablaría como de una doble moral. Cuando les decimos contesten el censo y los están usando en contra de nosotros, no creo que sea correcto. Me gustaría mucho reunirme con todos los que hacen las encuestas de la ciudad, de dónde sacan esas preguntas, de dónde sacan esa data que siempre está en contra de nosotros. Yo siento que si los concejales los escogieron es porque van a cuidar la comunidad, así como ellos lo juraron, cuidar los intereses comunitarios. Y ellos los escogieron a ustedes para esta comisión, porque eso es exactamente la misma responsabilidad que desearon tener. Así es que no hagan nada en contra de la comunidad que perjudique a nuestros niños y a nuestras familias. Porque aunque no digan que no es discriminación porque eso se ve en las áreas más sensibles y con menos privilegios. Gracias.
Thank you, Araceli. Cesar?
Good evening. My name is Amelia Robles, and I live in Santa Ana. And I've heard the entirety of this meeting, and I'm very concerned about the things that you're presenting, the people who are using the data and presenting data that does not benefit the community, but may damage the community. What is going to happen with family number 5 and the family number 6? We don't like sharing houses, and nobody does. I don't think you do. But the rents are just too high. What's going to happen with them, with these families? We cannot pay the rents, and I'm here to ask you, no, I'm not going to ask you. I'm here to demand that you help the city. You're using this double standard. You're telling us, go ahead, fill up the census information, and now you're using the census information against us. I would like to meet with the people who are who collect these surveys and ask them about this data. Why are you using this data against us? If the city council chose you, they chose you because you have the same values of protecting the community. So be responsible and do this job, your job, and protect the community. And do not act against the community, because then you're acting against children and the families. And well, you say this is not discrimination. It is discrimination because you're affecting the people who are less favored.
Thank you, Cesar.
Okay, we're going to go back to Sarai. If you'd like to speak, please go ahead now.
¿Y me escucha?
Sí.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Sarai Arpero, trabajo en Latino Home Taxes, vivo en Santana, he crecido 4 hijos aquí en Santana. y estoy en oposición a la ordenanza 2021-2 que prohíbe los hogares que tengan más de 5 contratos de arrendamiento en casas residenciales. Esta ordenanza no es neutral, sabiendo que 50 quejas en 6 años, eso da 8.3 llamadas por año, que si somos más de 300,000 habitantes, donde la mitad somos inquilinos, yo me estoy preguntando si esas quejas vienen de personas con privilegios que han sido escuchadas más que los inquilinos, quienes hemos exigido en otras protecciones. También tomando en cuenta que vivimos en uno de los condados más caros, ¿no? Se habló de la discriminación. Les recuerdo que la discriminación viene de muchas formas implícitas y no obvias. La definición de casa de huéspedes es muy abstracto y hasta tramposo para la comunidad de Santa Ana y para muchos dueños que tienen que rentar para poder sacar adelante sus pagos de casa y seguir sobreviviendo. Cuando hablan de la data y de la asistencia, de todo esto que se ha venido dando de asistencia para la renta, y hablan de que no fue compartida maliciosamente o para ser mal utilizada, así se está viendo. Se está viendo mal utilizada, se está viendo maliciosa, cómo la comunidad puede seguir confiando y seguir usando estas ayudas federales que están llegando cuando se van a poner, se van a descontextualizar. También estoy molesta, no entendí el comentario de vivir en cajas como en cajas de gallina. Eso creo que es un comentario fuera de lugar para la comunidad de Santa Ana que vive como puede y no como quiere. En esta pandemia no podemos tapar el sol con un dedo y decir que el problema de estacionamiento y el problema de la vivienda, eso vino a raíz de la pandemia. Esto fue mucho antes de la pandemia para no dar soluciones me refiero a una estabilización de renta, me refiero a todas las faltas que cometen los dueños al estar hostigando a los inquilinos. También cuando hablan, cuando se está hablando de esta ordenanza, se ve que es una ordenanza que criminaliza a las familias que están sobreviviendo a las situaciones, al mal manejo por parte de la ciudad, que no han tenido el tino para poder escuchar a una comunidad que les está pidiendo que necesitamos más vivienda asequible, que necesitamos un control de renta. Cuando dicen que esta ordenanza no es para solucionar la desigualdad de pobreza, entonces, ¿para qué proponen estas leyes? Cuando hablan de estándares de buen vivir, hace falta mucho trabajo en la vivienda y en menos dinero para la policía. Vivir en cajas de gallina, como les mencionaba, es una opción y no nos dejan de otra. Así que pido mucho más respeto para nuestras comunidades. Queremos confiar que ustedes están ahí para resolver el problema que hay en Santa Ana de pobreza e inequidad y de salud. Los datos de la ciudad no cuentan una historia de una comunidad que necesita más oportunidades de vivienda asequible y no ordenanzas que restringen, criminalizan a las comunidades. No hay definición de casa de huéspedes irresponsables. Aprobar esta ordenanza es un paso atrás a la confianza que se les ha dado en esas posiciones que tienen para ayudar y apoyar a nuestra comunidad. Les pido por favor que hagan a un lado esta ordenanza, que se estudie más y que de verdad esas 50 supuestas llamadas que se han hecho en 6 años es completamente incongruente, es injusto y no estoy de acuerdo con esta situación, siendo que aparte de ser promotora de salud, también soy consejera de vivienda y todos los días estoy escuchando los retos de las comunidades, cómo viven en esta situación y más en estos tiempos de pandemia. Gracias.
Thank you. Cesar, please.
One second, let me find my notes here. Good evening. My name is Saria Arroyo. I'm from Latino Health Access, a resident of Santa Ana. I've raised 4 children here, and I don't agree with, I'd like you not to approve Ordinance 2021-2. It's with limiting to over 5 rental agreements. This is not neutral. You're talking about 50 complaints over 6 years. That's 8.5, on average of 8.5 calls per year. We're a population in Santa Ana of over 300,000 people, and over half of the people are renters. So I'm wondering if the people who are making the complaints are the privileged people who do not have to deal with these situations. And we don't even have a definition, a clear definition of a boarding house. And the data that shows the housing, the rent, I think you're saying is not done with malice. I think you're using this data and the funds, the help funds from the federal government badly and with malice. We're talking about the use of this federal help that we're receiving, but we're not contextualizing this help, the situation. And I'm very angry. I don't understand this comment someone made about people living in chicken coops. People in Santa Ana don't live as they want. People are living as they can. So I ask for respect for our people. Don't ignore the situation. You're saying that the situation started, the parking situation, the housing situation was due to the pandemic, but these conditions were here before. We need rent stabilization. We need to stop owners from harassing the renters. This ordinance, you're saying it does not criminalize, but it criminalizes people who are just surviving. The city can't help the community to access. We need more accessible housing and affordable housing. And we're talking about the laws. We need to make laws to help the people. And again, you're talking about chicken coops. We do not have other housing options. So I ask for respect for our people. The data doesn't tell the whole story. We need more affordable housing so we do not criminalize the people. And we need to help people. I've been helping in the year, there's 50 complaints, the 50 calls over 60 years. It's not a fair comparison. I know of this because I also help with housing, I'm a housing counselor, and this is a great challenge that has been worsened during the pandemic.
Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you. Next caller is Rosie Ramirez. Please unmute your microphone. Go ahead now.
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Rosy Ramírez. Soy una residente de Santana y les quisiera pedirle por favor que no aprueben esta ordenanza. Y me gustaría que se enfocaran en otras cosas, ya que Santa Ana tiene muchas prioridades y la comunidad también. Y no me gustaría a mí también que hubiera muchos desalojos, porque es lo que más se está viendo ahorita. Los desalojos, como por ejemplo, hay personas que trabajan con el mínimo y no pueden pagar un apartamento para ellos. Por eso es que comparten con más familia, no porque ellos quieran vivir así. Y por favor, le pedimos más respeto a la comunidad y más tolerancia, por favor. No al racismo y más apoyo, por favor. Gracias.
Thank you. Cesar?
Good evening. My name is Rosy Ramirez. I'm a Santa Ana resident, and I'm here to ask you not to pass this ordinance. We need to focus on other issues in Santa Ana who have higher priority, such as the community. We don't need to have more evictions. It's going to create more evictions. People who are earning minimum wage and cannot afford an apartment on their own, so they have to share. It's not that they want to share. And we ask for respect for the community and more tolerance, not racism, but support the community.
Thank you, Cesar. Madam Secretary,
Thank you.
next.
Next caller, Alma, please unmute your microphone. Go ahead, you have 3 minutes.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Alma. Yo soy residente de aquí de Santa Ana. Tengo más de 30 años viviendo aquí. En este lugar de Santa Ana, nunca he salido de aquí. Y yo no lo veo como un problema, únicamente yo veo que lo que está haciendo falta es que la gente quizás lo mira como un problema que vive mucha gente en los departamentos, pero la verdad, tiene mucha gente rentando y yo no estoy en contra de ellos, pero yo no lo veo bien. Y yo sé que no pueden pagar sus rentas, pero sí vive mucha gente en un departamento. Viven hasta de 9 a 10 personas en un departamento, más aparte niños. Pero aparte el problema que yo estoy mirando en mi área es que donde yo vivo hay demasiado departamento. Mucha gente de los departamentos se vienen de este lado de mi área, no me dejan espacio para poner mis botes de basura, estropean mi driveway. Yo tengo que usar mi driveway para poner mis botes de basura porque muchos departamentos estropean con sus carros mi lugar para poner mi basura. No respetan. Una vez una persona me agredió porque me dijo que la calle era pública y que yo nomás le pedí de favor que me dejara un espacio para poner mis botes de basura. El señor se salió de su carro y me agredió. Yo sentí temor, creí que me iba a golpear, porque le pedí de favor que me dejara un espacio para poner mi basura que pasa los viernes. Yo la verdad tengo mucho miedo y no tengo nada contra esa gente, pero las otras personas también tienen que mirar que es antihigiénico, porque hay niños pequeños, quizá haya niñas o meten gente desconocida y ahí es donde puede haber conflicto de abusos. Y yo sé que a lo mejor es porque no pueden pagar sus rentas, pero yo les pediría que a ustedes como concejales y que nos están representando, que sí miraran y que calificaran a personas de bajos recursos, los dos ingresos del papá y la mamá, y que les dieran un lugar accesible para que ellos y sus familias puedan vivir y que no necesiten meter gente extraña en sus hogares, para que ellos puedan vivir dignamente y sin que haya mucho conflicto. Porque para mí es un poco malo, porque no tengo mi estacionamiento para yo poder poner mis containers de basura. Y esto es cada jueves, cada viernes que pasa la basura. Ese es el problema que yo tengo. Porque hay muchas gentes que tienen viviendo y todos tienen carros y todos andan orillándose a buscar un lugar cerca para ellos poder quedarse. Y más cuando pasa los lunes también la barredora. Es mucho problema, demasiado problema. Y sí me gustaría que tomaran en cuenta todas esas sugerencias mías y yo no tengo nada contra nadie de las viviendas de las personas de bajos recursos. Al contrario. Sí me gustaría que apoyaran más a esas gentes
Sarah?
para que ellos pudieran vivir mejor. Gracias.
Señora, gracias. Okay, thank you. Next caller
No,
is Josefina.
Sarah?
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Cesar?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sarah?
Yes, Caesar. Caesar.
Cesar,
Good
please.
evening. Yes. Good evening. My name is Alma, and I've been here living a resident of Santa Ana for over 30 years. I've been here. Always been here, never left, and I don't see this as a problem. I see that there's a need, but I don't see a problem that many people live in the same houses. They have to rent, and I'm not against that. People cannot pay their own rent, so lots of people are living in an apartment. In my area, I see 9 to 10 people in an apartment plus the children. In my area, there are too many apartments next to my area, and they come to my area, and I cannot send my trash cans out for trash day. And cars come and mess up my place, mess up my driveway. And I had a situation with this guy. I asked him not to leave a space for my trash cans, and he got out of his car and was menacing towards me. And he told me this was a public street, and he got out of the car, and I was very afraid. This is a situation that happens on Fridays on trash day. And people may not see this as a problem. This is not hygienic. You have many people living together. You have children. You may have strangers there, and they're subjected, prone to possible abuse. So I ask you, as council people, as our representatives, to do something. Maybe consider the incomes of both parents, put them together, and maybe based on that, you can give them or provide some affordable housing without having to resort to accepting strangers in their home, so they can have dignified housing and there are no conflicts like this. I don't have my own parking. There's trash. This situation happens every Thursday evening before the Friday trash day, and all the cars are parking there. Everybody has cars. They all park everywhere, and I don't have any problem with this. So please listen to this situation. I'm not against low-income people, but they need support to have affordable housing.
Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you. Next caller, Josefina, please unmute yourself. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Ok, muchísimas gracias. Mi nombre es Josefina Jiménez. Yo vivo aquí en la ciudad de Santa Ana. Tengo a 3 hijos que están creciendo en esta misma ciudad. Trabajo en Santa Ana y mis hijos han hecho sus estudios aquí en esta misma ciudad. Yo estoy en contra de la ordenanza 2021-02. Realmente lo que estamos escuchando aquí todos es de que realmente necesitamos viviendas a bajo costo para nuestras comunidades. No nos gusta tanto a latinos como a filipinos, asiáticos y otras culturas que están viviendo también aquí en Santa Ana. No nos gusta vivir en hacinamiento, más sin embargo, las condiciones económicas que se está viviendo en nuestra ciudad, en nuestro condado, son tan caras que nos orillan a estar en esta situación. Ahora, después de la pandemia, estamos todavía aún más vulnerables. Yo tengo una pregunta. Aquí donde yo vivo, sobre el IS de la McFadden, a todos nos cobran un permiso extra anualmente para poder tenerlo en nuestro carro y se pueda estacionar en la calle. ¿Dónde van esos fondos? ¿Dónde van esos fondos que realmente cada año muchas de nuestras familias pagamos 2 carros para poder tener ese beneficio y no podamos estar llenos de tickets, ¿me entienden? Quisiera saber eso. También quisiera saber qué realmente están haciendo para poder ganarse la confianza de nuestra comunidad. Están sacando estadísticas de información que nosotros como comunidad hemos confiado y depositado en ustedes y ahora se está usando mucho en contra de nuestra propia comunidad. Yo creo que esa no es la solución y la invitación que todos los que estamos aquí es poder encontrar una solución a todo este problema. No es quitar estacionamientos, no es restringir cuántos viven en tu casa, no es ver dónde tú realmente estás viviendo, por qué estás viviendo o desde qué punto lo estás observando, sino realmente hay una necesidad muy grande y esta pandemia la está haciendo más evidente. Así que tenemos que sentarnos desde otro parámetro y ver realmente qué es lo que necesitamos. Por años se ha dicho unas viviendas dignas. Santa Ana tiene la población más joven de todo el condado y muchos de ellos no tienen un espacio seguro para correr, para caminar, inclusive para hacer tareas. Y no es porque nos guste vivir así, sino porque es la necesidad que existe en nuestra comunidad. Ustedes como políticos tienen la responsabilidad de quitar esas barreras y hacer que esos jóvenes y niños crezcan con una calidad de vida diferente a la que se ha estado tornando más de 30 años. Entonces, esta es una invitación para todos. Y no queremos, y gracias señora Alma por dar su comentario, sabemos, y yo soy testigo que también ha pasado en casas de que no te dejan sacar el bote de basura porque hay carros estacionados y demás, pero también tenemos la otra cara de la moneda. Si usted camina por otras calles, hay calles privatizadas que solamente se estacionan con los permisos de estacionamiento que le estoy mencionando, ¿no? Y si realmente tú te estacionas por error o porque necesitas bajar a dejar algo con una vecina, te dan, inmediatamente viene un oficial y te da una multa. Entonces,
3 minutes.
muchísimas gracias. Y ojalá sí se tome en cuenta todos y cada uno de estos comentarios.
Cesar?
Josefina Jimenez, and I'm a Santa Ana resident, and I have 3 children here. I work in Santa Ana, and my children go to school here, they study here. I am against this ordinance 2021-02. We need low-income housing, and all of us, Latinos, Filipinos, Asians, nobody likes living in overcrowded conditions. We are forced to live this way because of these conditions. It's not that we like it. I have a question, a question for you. I live around McFadden where there's parking permit on the street. And where does the money go for this? And we have 2 cars, and we don't want to get tickets when we park there. So another question is, what are you doing to gain the trust of the community when you're collecting data from us and they're using this data against the community? This is not the solution. We want to find the solution together to these problems. We are not taking these problems. We need to find solutions. There's a big need, and this big need is for housing. We do not want to have a lot of people in unaffordable housing. This is a big need for housing, and the pandemic has made this need even greater. For years, we've been asking for dignified housing. We have the youngest population in the county in Santa Ana, and we do not like living like this. We need to provide better quality of life. You are our representatives, so we need to invest. And I like the comment that Alma made. We do not have a place sometimes to place our trash cans, and other people have privatized streets with permits. And if you park there, even just to drop off something to a friend, you get a ticket right away.
Thank you, Cesar. Sarah, the next
Thank
person.
you. Yes, next caller, Alejandra Luciano. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and start speaking now. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Alejandra Luciano, soy residente de Santana. Y la verdad, como dicen mis compañeras, la verdad está muy difícil en compartir rentas. Y la verdad y más caro, más ahorita, más por la pandemia. Mucha gente se les bajó el trabajo, las despidieron, nos quedamos sin trabajo por un tiempo y la verdad es muy difícil. Ustedes están queriendo aprobar algo que no tienen que aprobar. Deberían de enfocarse en control de renta, porque la verdad es muy difícil pagar una renta muy alta, que la verdad ahorita con lo del COVID no es recomendable ahorita para esto. Nos gustaría que aprobaran algo más para las rentas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Cesar.
Good evening, my name is Alejandro Luciano, and I'm a Santa Ana resident, and I agree with the other people's comments. It's very hard to pay the rent, and we have to share the rent. Here the rents are very high, and many people lost their jobs due to the pandemic. Many of us were laid off for a time. I ask you not to approve this ordinance. Let's focus on other things like rent control. The rents are too high, and the situation with COVID is not helping. So please do something to help with the rent.
Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you. Next caller is, let's see here, Idalia Rios. Please go ahead, unmute yourself. You will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hola, buenas tardes. Primero que nada, quería agradecer a todas las personas que han hablado. Y mi nombre, bueno, vivo en el área 2 y también soy parte del grupo comunitario VELA, que significa Vecindario Lazy en Acción. Y hablaban acerca de estadísticas o de información colectada. En los últimos, antes de que empezara la pandemia, 3 años atrás, nosotros colectamos información de nuestros vecinos y mayoría de ellos son de extremadamente bajos recursos. Cuando hablamos acerca del tema de la vivienda, que es una necesidad básica, a veces no pensamos generalmente que son adultos, pero no pensamos en nuestros niños, no pensamos en nuestros adultos mayores, y que en Santa Ana mayoría de residentes son inquilinos. Entonces, lo único que les iba a pedir es que por momentos pónganse en los zapatos de estas personas que, a pesar de que la pandemia nos mostró muchas inequidades, son las personas que han salido a trabajar y han seguido trabajando, pero no ha habido aumento en los salarios, pero sí ha habido aumentos de rentas. Entonces, cuando hablamos de sacar o de alguna manera multar a personas que están viviendo por más de 5 familias tal vez en un hogar, también pensemos y tengamos un poquito de empatía en favor de las familias que representamos, en favor de las familias que lo único que están haciendo es sobrevivir. Otra cosa es cuando vemos a las personas sin hogar y vemos a personas adultas, pero a veces no pensamos que si seguimos actuando de esta manera, en un futuro no solamente van a ser personas adultas, sino van a ser familias completas de niños y adultos mayores en nuestras calles. So, por favor, piensen en que si en sus manos está tomar decisiones a favor de esas familias que no tienen quien las defienda, que no tienen quien las represente, pero ustedes como servidores públicos pueden tomar ese tipo de decisiones de protegerlos en lo que la ciudad toma otro tipo de protecciones para los inquilinos o también con estos fondos que vienen y realmente construyen vivienda accesible, asequible para familias que ya están en Santa Ana y realmente una familia, como mencionaba una señora anterior, que mamá y papá e hijos puedan vivir en un solo apartamento. Pero mientras eso no suceda, por favor, protejan a las familias que no tienen quien los represente. Gracias.
Thank you, Debbie. Cesar.
My name is Dalia Rios, and first of all, thank you for the people who have spoken. And I'm a resident of Ward 2. I'm a member of Vela, Vecindario Lacey and Acción. And you've talked about a lot of statistics that you have collected. Before the pandemic, our group worked to collect lots of statistics and information in the community, and we found out that many in our community are of extremely low income. And we're thinking about housing, but housing does not only, we only see adults when we think about housing, but we're not thinking of the children. We're not thinking of the elderly that live with these adults. And Santa Ana, most of the Santa Ana residents are renters. So I invite you to put yourself in their shoes. And you see these people are hardworking, they're essential workers. They have not had a salary increase, but the rents have increased. And people, you're thinking now of finding people who have to live more than 5 families in a home. I ask you to have empathy for these families whom you represent, these families who are only surviving. And you see the people who are homeless out there. And if you continue on this path, you're not only going to see homeless out there, you're going to see entire families with children and elderly people in the streets. So I'm asking you to help these people who have no one to protect them from in the city and with city funds. And now that there's funds for renters and the funds that are coming, use them to help these people to find accessible and affordable housing in Santa Ana.
Thank you. Next caller, Daisy Cruz. Please unmute your microphone. You may begin speaking now. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, planning commissioners and the public. My name is Daisy, and I'm calling on behalf of the Kennedy Commission. The city's high rent and shortage of affordable housing options in the city have contributed to the high rate at which residents are forced to live in overcrowded housing conditions in order to afford staying in their home and in their city. Banning families from living together to afford rent or their mortgage will only contribute to the displacement of longtime residents. As a city with 80% of renters that fall into moderate, low, and very low income, many of whom have also been heavily impacted by COVID, the city's priorities should be on addressing the current needs and the disparate effects of the pandemic. In addition, creating housing stability should be a part of the city's short and long-term economic recovery strategy that will directly benefit the city's residents. The creation of new land use opportunities, policies, and programs or cooperatives, as Carla and others had mentioned, that will increase the new affordable housing for lower income residents in Santa Ana should be a priority instead of policies that restrict housing options. I'd also like to mention or add that the way in which this proposed plan was first introduced by using data from folks who applied for rental assistance from the city during their most vulnerable time, during a time when many have lost family and their jobs due to this pandemic, to use the public's trust against them and criminalize folks living together to make ends meet is something that should have never happened. I'd also like to add that there are other comments on the YouTube chat from Spanish-speaking folks that I think the Planning Commission should also take into consideration. Please vote against the proposed ordinance. Thank you.
Daisy, next.
Thank you. The next caller is Laura Pantoja. Please go ahead and begin speaking. You'll have 3 minutes. Laura, if you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself and go ahead and begin speaking.
Sí, hola, buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Mi nombre es Laura Pantoja, soy una promotora de una organización comunitaria que se llama Latino Health Access, pero también soy residente de Santa Ana y también soy inquilina. Y por muchos años hemos trabajado con la ciudad acerca de la vivienda, porque la vivienda para las familias ha sido un problema. Por muchos años no tuvimos inspectores que reforzaran los códigos de mantenimiento de los departamentos, que sí están registrados, que sí pagan impuestos, y los dueños de esos departamentos pagan $20 por cada departamento, y ese fondo nunca ha sido claro hacia dónde va. Y por muchos años hemos visto cómo las condiciones de los departamentos que sí pagan impuestos, sí están registrados, sí saben que viven familias, están en muy malas condiciones. Tienen ratones, tienen infectación de chinchas, tenemos muchas familias que se han enfermado, no tienen aire acondicionado, no tienen calefacción, la pintura tiene muchos años y las condiciones, y las comisiones nunca se han preocupado para crear una ordenanza para proteger a la gente que sí está registrada y saben que está alquilando un departamento. Entonces, por eso se me hace muy extraño que quieran crear una ordenanza que directamente está dirigida a las familias que tienen que vivir 4 o 5 familias en el mismo lugar. Son las mismas familias y los mismos vecindarios que las condiciones de vida son muy difíciles, las mismas familias que se infectaron de COVID, las mismas familias que perdieron su trabajo en la pandemia y las mismas familias que han perdido familiares, y ahora ustedes van a crear ordenanzas que van a tenerse que salir y se van a tener que salir de Santa Ana. Esta ordenanza sí está dirigida directamente a las familias pobres de esta ciudad, que son la mayoría. Gracias.
Thank you. Cesar?
Good evening. My name is Laura Pantoja, and I'm a promoter for Latino Health Access, a resident of Santa Ana and a renter. For many years, we've worked with the city on housing issues. For many years, we did not have code enforcement inspectors to go to the apartments, these apartments that are registered, that pay taxes, where the owner pays $20 per apartment. I wonder where this money is going. For many years, we've had bad conditions in these apartments that are registered, these apartments that pay taxes are in bad shape. They have mice, they have bed bugs, people are getting sick, there's no heater, no air conditioning, paint is peeling, and there is no ordinance to protect the renters of these regulated and taxed apartments. So it's very strange now that you want to pass an ordinance that is going to punish 4 or 5 families that are living together. This situation has been hard for families, and now with COVID, people have lost their jobs, people have lost loved ones, and now you want to kick them out of their house, you want to kick them out of Santa Ana. This ordinance attacks the poor people, and which is most people in Santa Ana.
Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you. Next caller is Santos. Please unmute your microphone and begin speaking. You'll have 3 minutes.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Santos Santana.
Soy un residente de aquí de la ciudad de Santa Ana por 27 años y estoy un poco consternado por las cosas que están tratando de promover. Ah, es triste ver que hay personas que trabajan en el field, que trabajan duro para llevar el sustento a su familia, a su hogar, y aún así, muy apenas alcanzan para pagar su renta. Yo a base de esfuerzo he sacado a mi hija a la universidad. Tengo 27 años aquí. He pagado mis impuestos día a día, todo el tiempo he pagado. Y no es que no me guste otro lado o vivir mejor. Desgraciadamente lo que ganamos es muy poco. Aunque tengo una mini empresa, no es suficiente como para mudarme a una ciudad más cara, porque todo es caro aquí. Y tengo amigos, familiares que trabajan en el field, ganando el mínimo. Y se me hace injusto que promuevan esas ordenanzas que criminalizan a personas porque viven más de 5 personas. A mí me gustaría que en vez de que enfocaran en eso, que se enfocaran, como dicen las compañeras, en buscar viviendas dignas y a bajo costo u otras cosas, enfocar dinero, fondos que reciben del gobierno federal en parques. Las escuelas de aquí de Santa Ana no tienen parques para que los hijos de uno vayan a disfrutar un momento ahí. Eso es lo que tienen que promover, vivienda digna y a bajo costo, y no esas criminalizaron nada más porque viven más de 5 personas. Ese es mi punto de vista. Disculpen. Es todo. Gracias. Que pasen buenas noches.
Thank you. Cesar.
Good evening. My name is Santos Santana. I've been a resident of Santa Ana for 27 years, and I'm very concerned because of what you're trying to promote here. It's sad to see that people who have been working in the field very hard cannot afford their home. It's hard to see, they have a hard time paying the rent. I've worked hard for many years, for 27 years, to put my daughter through college. I've been paying taxes for 27 years, and it's not that I don't want that. And it's not that I don't want to go to another place to move to a more expensive city, but it's very difficult. My income is very low. I have a micro business, and I cannot afford to go anywhere else. So it's very hard when you want to have this ordinance. It's not fair that you want to criminalize people who live more than 5 people in a place. And we need to focus on dignified, affordable housing. Use the federal monies that you're receiving for parks. The schools do not have enough parks for families to go and enjoy. So we need dignified and affordable housing and not criminalize people who are living 5 or more people in a place. And that's all I have to say. Good evening.
Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you. Next caller is Priscilla Medina. Please unmute your microphone and go ahead and start speaking. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Priscila Medina. Soy residente de aquí de Santa Ana. Vivo en la comunidad Sullivan y pertenezco al grupo de Sullivan en Acción. Y bueno, esta noche es triste escuchar que en vez de solucionar los problemas de la comunidad, nos están dando más problemas. Soy una madre soltera y en nombre de ellas también hablo. Tengo 4 niños y si entre una pareja, 2 esposos, no pueden pagar la renta, ya se pueden imaginar ustedes una madre soltera, lo difícil que nos resulta hacerlo. Es por eso que a veces abocamos a vivir en una habitación, quizás más de 3, 4, 5 familias porque no hay de otra. Vemos que el déficit habitacional sigue creciendo, no hay viviendas, más las rentas sí siguen subiendo sin control. Veo que no hay políticas de inversión en vivienda, no hay inversión ni de parte del Estado, del gobierno, menos de la ciudad, que es lo que realmente hace falta. Y esto es un problema que ya viene de décadas. Solamente la inversión se la da a nivel de grandes inversionistas, grandes compañías que solamente lo hacen con finalidades de lucro, de ganar ellos, en desmedro y en pobreza de los que menos ganan, cuando deberían hacerlo con finalidad social, para de cierta manera poder solucionar este problema de la vivienda. Ustedes han sido elegidos concejales para buscar estas soluciones más justas y humanas para la comunidad, para las familias de más bajos recursos. Y esta ordenanza no soluciona en nada el problema de la vivienda. El techo es un derecho para todos. Y entonces hago un llamado a la lógica, al sentido común y a la humanidad que ustedes las caracteriza para solucionar este problema y no pasar esta ordenanza 2021-02. Gracias.
Thank you. Cesar.
Good evening. My name is Priscilla Medina. I've been a resident of Santa Ana for many years in the Sullivan community. I'm also a member of Sullivan in Action. It's sad to hear what's going on here, that instead of solving a problem, you are aggravating a problem. And if I'm a single mom, I have 4 children, I raise my kids, and if 2 adults, a mom and dad, cannot pay the rent, imagine a single mom's situation. We're doing what we can. We don't want to live in a room, in a place with 3, 4, or 5 families, but we have no choice. There are no housing. There's no housing around here, but the rents are going up and are out of control. There's no housing, there's no investment for housing from the state, the government, or the city. And this is not a new problem. This problem has been around for decades. And when the city invests, they invest in great people and great companies who are only looking after profits and not looking for the social issues that are here that need to be solved. So you are elected as a council people to help people who are low income, to help solve these social issues. This ordinance does not solve the housing issue. I'm calling on your humanity to help solve this and not pass the ordinance 2021-02.
Thank you, Cesar. Is there anyone else that is in the queue at this point in time? Sarah?
Chair, no, we do not have any other callers with their hands raised.
Okay. Since we have no other callers at this point in time, we will close the public hearing and bring it back.
Point of order, did we translate everyone?
Yes.
Yes, we did translate, unless you thought we missed anybody. I believe Cesar translated everyone. Okay, having said that, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission at this point in time for discussion. Does the commission have any further questions of staff or any final questions of staff at this point in time? Commissioner Commissioner Ramos.
Thank you, Chair McLaughlin. Are we making our final comments now, or do you want to do just questions for staff?
We can have a discussion at this point in time. We
Thank
can
you.
make a motion at this point in time. We have any option that's in front of us at this.
Thank you. Well, I first want to thank all of the speakers that called in tonight. Thank you so much for calling in, participating in this process, and for waiting with us this long. Gracias a todos que llamaron y participaron esta noche. Les agradezco que estén participando en el proceso y compartiendo sus opiniones. Y gracias por esperar hasta esta hora. After hearing all of the speakers, I don't feel comfortable moving forward with this tonight. I think we are rushing through this process, and I don't know that we need to, especially after hearing directly from staff that there is no state law requiring us to act on this. within a specific time frame. I understand the issues that this policy is attempting to address, but I don't know, I don't believe that the way that it is being presented as of now will be of great benefit to the community. I see this as posing a lot of harm right now. And I ask all of the commissioners to really think about this. I know many may have already made up their mind, but I ask you to really think about this. Think about all of the comments that have been made tonight, and think about the urgency to do this. I don't see an urgency, at least not tonight. And with that, I'll rest my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ramos. Does any other commissioner like to make a comment at this time? Commissioner Alderetti.
Thank you. I would agree with those comments. I think earlier I had said that I was trying to understand why this was coming to us now. I think with all the speakers that came, I think we can all see that this is an urgent issue that boils down to an affordability issue. I do feel like we are rushing this. As I sit here right now, I feel a lot more comfortable if the housing definition, the boarding house definition did not include residents with 5 or fewer rental agreements. But I also see the tension here between neighbors and between neighbors. And I think when we've got a city that's 50% are renters, we really have to take our time with this, because the reality is housing in our city is dense, and it's dense because there's a profound lack of affordability. And as I sit here now, this ordinance doesn't move the ball forward in that regard. And so I think I need to educate myself more on this ordinance, and as it's drafted, I just don't feel comfortable moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Alderetti. Commissioner Vice Chair Morrissey.
Yes, I guess the comment I have is very similar. I think passing this really doesn't change, it really doesn't improve the health or safety of anyone living in Santa Ana. I think hearing everybody speak, I agree. I don't think moving this forward really improves things for anyone. I think we need to look for a way to improve the living conditions here for these high density multifamily or group living conditions. And I don't think it does it yet. So still trying to figure out how to make a motion to accomplish that, but I don't think we're there yet. I think it just needs more study.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Morrissey. Commissioner Fan.
I'd like to thank you, the public, for their comments. I tend to agree. I think we do need more time to iron out the issues that were brought up. But then I would also add that we might be attributing a lot of exterior intent and issues to this amendment that it's hard to ask what staff has written and put before us to address almost everything that we've brought up, because like the other commissioners have said, it's very interrelated, and we can pull in a lot of social issues, code issues, and potential laws that I just think that I do agree that we need more time to review what's in front of us, but then I'm not sure if we can move forward if we're trying to incorporate so much and trying to find a resolution to so much in this one specific ordinance. And yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Okay,
That's all.
thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner Fan. Commissioner Wu.
I want to thank the speakers that came out to speak to us tonight. I know some of you very well. I respect you very much. I do understand the social issue and the economic inequity that exists in society. And I don't think the intent has been that we would demonize the poor in the city. I worked in this field for 40 years and I have not heard the language. I go back to the first presentation where staff, we grilled them. We asked a lot of questions. And again, I'd like to remind the other commissioner, the question was that other city were using the license part to punitively go after some group homes that serve for people with alcoholism or disability because they didn't want them in their neighborhood. But the language that we had on the books put us in kind of, I don't know if it's harm way, but it may have run afoul. So staff started a process of trying to clean that up. The state and the federal guidelines on discrimination for protected classes are very definite. So the licensed facility had to be regulated by other jurisdictions. Within our jurisdiction, it goes back to what is our function as a planning commission is to look at land use and land zoning. And so thus they try to separate into something simple without having to define that you must have a bathroom, you must have this, you must have that, which would limit the use of property for housing. Those things are going to come up anyway as neighborhood people complain about parking. They're going to look at the parking situation. As tenants complain about plumbing not working, that's going to come up with inspection there. And I think the issue is you need to separate those enforcement issues and potential to look at simply saying that things that don't fall into this category fall into rooming houses. And it doesn't say what kind of housing it can be, that it has to be for persons with disability. It doesn't say that it's only for women or men, or it doesn't really define it. It just says that they are rooming houses and that is 5 leases, and that 5 leases doesn't determine the number of people. So, you know, since there is a lot of misinformation and mischaracterization and bringing issues that are unrelated to this, it seems like we're not ready to make a decision on something that is very simple, and that it's not our job to allocate resources towards housing, although I wish we could. It's not our job, nor do we have the control over funding to say, I want 500 low-income housing, the rent not to be more than $250. I would love to do that, but I neither have the authority, neither does the commission to do that, nor to allocate the resources, because that happens with the city council. The use of the federal funding is not all free, and you can do whatever you want with it. I've had a minister over $100 million in federal funding that comes to meet different kinds of emergency over the last 40 years. And they come with a lot of strings that spell out what you can and cannot do. So while we simply think that, oh, they're asking for our input on how to spend it, when we make suggestions, they may not fall into a category where you can use that money, because if you inappropriately use that money, you have to pay it back. And I would agree with you, most definitely, unequivocally. There is a lot of social problem brought up by the pandemic, a lot of problem brought in by inequity from centuries of enslaving people and putting them to be underclass. I would agree with you wholeheartedly, but that's not the issue before us. And this is not the place, nor is this the mission. So, you know, I'm sorry. while I may agree with some commissioners in terms of this may not be ready because we don't seem to be making ourselves ready by listening to all the presentation since the day one, and in addition to the input by the community tonight, you know, but being able to sort that out. So that's where I am, and I don't mean to attack anyone personally, nor the commission, nor anyone in the public. It's just that I've been listening and I hear contradictions, I hear going around the circle, and you know, I like to either do something or throw it away.
Thank you, Commissioner Wu. Commissioner Ramos.
Thank you. I know I had said that my previous comments would be the last, but I just want to also take a moment to acknowledge some of the comments that were made by the public, specifically over comments that they found insensitive and offensive. So I just want to apologize to members of the public that felt that. And I hope that any of us that may have, including myself, if I made any comments that were offensive or insensitive, I ask that you forgive me or anyone else, and please continue to participate. I hope that these comments don't discourage you. As commissioners, we have a lot to learn from everybody and their lived experiences, and I hope that we'll all continue to take those comments into consideration as we make decisions. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else at this point in time would like to speak? If not, I will request a motion on this matter.
This is Commissioner Alderetti. I'd like to request that we continue this item at a minimum for 2 weeks. I don't know that that will be sufficient, but that's my motion.
Okay. Do we have a second at this point in time?
I'll second that.
Second by Vice Chair Morrissey. Is there any other comments, questions that you have of staff? Do we have any questions of some of the staff that was here? Alvaro, any other questions that we might have on the table, or any other comments at this point in time? I'll go through the list. Commissioner Alderetti?
Excuse me, I didn't hear.
Is there anything else that you have to say before we take this to a vote?
No, that's it.
Okay, Commissioner, Vice Chair Morrison.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Commissioner Pham.
No, thank you.
Commissioner Ramos.
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Wu.
No.
Okay, I have no comments or questions at this point in time. At this time then, Madam Secretary, would you please read the motion? And then can we do a roll call vote?
Chairman,
Yes.
I apologize for interrupting. I would just like to ask for some clarification from Commissioner Alderetti. When suggesting the motion to continue for 2 weeks, is there any specific direction you can provide as to like what you'd like to see in the next 2 weeks in terms of updated information or anything that we can better respond to make sure that 2 weeks is enough time to generate any new information?
That's a great question, Ali. I think for me, it's what would be the impact if we change the definition to not include 5 or more. So I think right now that's really what I'm trying to get at, and maybe be creative about what other alternatives we could look at. I know that Commissioner Morrissey mentioned he was concerned about tying it to occupancy as opposed to just rental agreements. And while I don't know that that'll get us where we need to go, I think that is something that other commissioners have a concern about.
Thank
Can
you.
I propose a friendly amendment to Commissioner? Commissioner Alderete, I'd like to recommend that this discussion not come back to the commission until the housing element roundtable discussions scheduled for the month of June happen. I think this is a discussion that should also be held there as I know there's going to be various stakeholders and representatives from different commissions. So I think that those discussions could help shape what this looks like, or they could at least help us have additional considerations when we discuss this.
That's a good point. I think Commissioner Morrissey had also mentioned that. So I'll accept that friendly amendment.
Okay.
Thank you. Then given Commissioner Ramos's input and your acceptance of that amendment, I'd just like to suggest that the motion be reworded to not reference 2 weeks and maybe left to a date uncertain so that we can also properly re-notify as needed.
Can I ask a question? Wouldn't, when you have the housing element and the general plan, the other social issue will be dealt with there by either stating a goal or proposing some actions, right? At the end of the day, on the land use, what would be the land use issue that we still have to address?
The land use issue is still relating to ensuring that we have adequate provision in our zoning code to address housing issues that comes
So
out.
nothing really changes, right?
Nothing
Because those
changes.
other things have to be addressed in other areas.
Right, we do have to address from a land use perspective on how to address housing for our community.
Right, but the goals for that would be established under the housing element, right?
Right.
Okay, so it would have nothing to do with, setting aside some, a wording for, boarding houses.
Correct.
Yeah, see, and that's what I'm trying to say. I was not trying to be disrespectful to the people that spoke. I understood very well what they're saying, but I'm thinking that, is this the place, you're making a peach pie, but you're talking about an apple. And nothing will change in a couple of weeks.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Wu. I think if we are to defer this further down the road, I think it needs to be clear that, what are the standards in which we're going to make our decisions, because if we keep introducing more and more issues and topics onto this specific ordinance, I foresee it just dragging on, and there's no concrete standard in which we're going to make our decision, because either I foresee it keep being postponed because we are going to teeter on the issue of more than 5 or less than 5 or no number at all. But I rather, if we are to postpone voting on this, that as a commission we agree that there's a standard in which we're going to be viewing this issue, and not just add more and more kind of layers to it that might not pertain to this immediate task.
I want to quickly respond to that.
Hold on. Commissioner Ramos, for a second there, please. Thank you. Are you completed with what you had to say, Val?
Yes, that's
Okay,
all. I
thank
just,
you.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner Pham, if I was getting ahead of myself there. But I just wanted to raise that I've been bringing up the housing element since the first time that this was brought to us 2 meetings ago. I do think that it is something that we need to consider as we go through this housing element update. And I continue to feel the same way. I felt this way since it was first brought to us. And I do think that those discussions could inform us and our decision making, because while I understand that some commissioners see this as a very specific task, I don't think we can separate its impacts on housing and its impacts on residents. Thank you.
If I can, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think this is a very important discussion, and I'm hearing that our YouTube channel is not working. Our Planning Commission Secretary, do you have access to the YouTube channel for live streaming?
I only have the same access that the public has to be able to view it.
Is it, I understand it's frozen?
I can check. We have IT looking into that.
Sarah and Min and commissioners, IT was just in my office confirming that the live stream on YouTube had ceased and frozen a while back, but that the meeting was still accessible via Zoom and PrimeGo.
Got it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Anything else, Min?
No, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Aldereti.
I think the motion still stands. I accepted the friendly amendment, so maybe we could just call the question.
Okay, Madam Secretary, can we talk to the motion itself? And
Sure. Commissioner Aldereti initially motioned to continue the item for 2 weeks. We have changed it to a date uncertain. Commissioner Ramos introduced a friendly amendment to not have the item return until the commission, return to the commission until it has been reviewed at the Housing Element Roundtable. And Commissioner Aldereti did accept that friendly amendment.
okay, and we have a second to that from Vice Chair Morrissey. Any other comments, any other statements that need to be made at this point in time? Commissioner Aldereti called for the question, so Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Aldereti,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon, Vice Chair Morrissey,
Aye.
Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin.
Aye.
Motion passes by majority consent with Commissioner Calderon absent.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for your input and everything else. What I'd like to do at this point in time is two things. One, go back to the consent calendar, open up the consent calendar once again. And we have a vote on the absence, on the excused absence of Commissioner Calderon. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
I'll second.
Commission, okay, Morrissey, second. Madam Secretary, do a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Aldereti,
Aye.
Vice Chair Morrissey,
Aye.
Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Chair McLaughlin.
Aye.
Majority, motion passes by majority consent with Commissioner Calderon absent.
Okay, and at this point in time, we will close the consent calendar and go back to what we had scheduled at this point in time. We're going to close also the business calendar at this time. We were going to move into a work study calendar with John Funk, but I think for all intent and purposes, I don't think we'll do a good service at 9 o'clock this evening. So I'd like to make the motion that we carry this work study session over to the next Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
Okay, second from Commissioner Aldereti. Any comments on this at any point in time? Okay, if there's no comments. Madam Secretary, would you please do a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Aldereti,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morrissey,
Aye.
Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin.
Aye.
Motion passes by majority vote with Commissioner Aldereti, I'm sorry, Commissioner Calderon absent.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll close the work study session and we'll move on to staff comments.
Thank you, Chair. There's no comment for myself tonight.
Okay. Then we will move on to commissioners' comments. And Commissioner Wu, do you have any comments at this point? Final comments?
I don't know what to say, but I just hope that as we discuss things with the community, it would be accurate.
Okay. Commissioner Ramos.
I just want to thank the community once again for participating in this process tonight. I thank the commissioners for your thoroughness and thoughtfulness as we considered the last item. And also just invite us to think about the platform that we have and the way that we utilize it, especially with the comments that we make and how they might impact community members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fan.
Yes, I just want to thank you everyone for their time. I know this is it's been a long conversation, but I think it's a good one. So yeah, thank you.
Vice Chair Morrissey.
Yes, I would likewise like to thank staff for their thoughtfulness and work putting together all the presentations we saw tonight, and all the residents who called in and their concern for their community. And hopefully this additional time will allow us to put together something that will be satisfactory to everybody and help move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Morrissey. Commissioner Alderetti.
No comment.
Okay, I just want to thank everybody, the commissioners, staff, and those that participated in the public hearing. Appreciate all of the input that was received, and hopefully we can move this process forward in the near future. Other than that, I will make a motion to adjourn this regular meeting to be held via teleconference. Oh, sorry. Before I make a motion on adjournment, one question I want to ask the staff is, are we considering, or is it being considered that we might be going back to live commission meetings in the future?
Yes, the answer, Chair, is yes, as we're working with our city clerk to mirror the protocol of the planning of the city council. And I believe there is intention to go back in person. We will notify you as soon as we have the appropriate protocol for that in-person process.
Can we also have an option to attend remote?
I think all options are open right now. We have seen that there are certain good practices that came out of this process, and one of that practice is potentially have the ability to both have virtual and in person at the minimum for the attendees and audience. And we can make a determination whether or not officially can address that for the commissioner as well. So
yeah, I'm still concerned about gatherings of large group with unrelated people.
Absolutely, understandable.
Thank you for your input on that, Commissioner Wu, and thanks for the update, Min. Having said that, once again, we'll adjourn the meeting. The next regularly scheduled meeting will be held via teleconference on Monday, June 14th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.